place for conversations. SDAQ&A. You're safe to speak your truth. Common ground, shared beliefs with lots of room for disagreement. Tell us all what you believe and let us see if we can challenge you. From all paths coming here to share their stories. Some have left this global church, some remain and defend her. Where are you on the path? Does Ellen still appeal to you? SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. 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 Oh, SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. SDAQ&A, you
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever
God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to SDAQ&A. I am Peter Dixon and we are episode 13, season 16. I usually try and make each season 25 to 30 episodes long, and we're entering 6 years now of going live into Facebook. But we've just hit 10 years as a channel, a platform, SDAQ&A. And coming up next month, or the month after, in April 15, is 10 years since I left the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So this is SDAQ&A, a former Adventist looking in from the outside, revealing Adventism one conversation at a time. Welcome everybody watching. Great to have you here. Let's dive straight into today's program. We're going to be going back in time to 2020 when I began season 2. And this and the whole season was, as you know, about Glacier View and Dr. Desmond Ford. Tell you what, we dug deep and we discovered some incredible happenings that, you know, I feel have truly vindicated Des Ford. So Dr. John Paulien is the gentleman that I interviewed 6 years ago now, 2020. And his interview with me was number 35 of 86 interviews. And some of these interviews I struggle remembering, but I really am enjoying the uploading experience of these to the public platform for the first time ever. So many of you have not seen this interview. Welcome to those listening on the podcast. You are hearing my voice from 2026, but soon we will be going back in time to 2020. So let's begin, and feel free to keep the chat and comments going on the side there. I'm always sitting in the background watching and enjoying the conversation as well. I endeavor today to not interrupt the chat. Is that possible? Do you want to lay your bets now to see if I can keep quiet? Let's see how we go. Here we are, episode 35, season 2. Hi and welcome to another SDA Q&A. I'm Peter Dixon and my very special guest today is Dr. John Paulien. Am I pronouncing that correctly, John?
Sounded good to me.
Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
And
A little bit down under touch there, but all good.
yeah. It's funny because my dad is a New Zealand boy, and my mum is an Australian girl, and so we've lived half and half between the two countries. And I noticed as a young boy that it would only take me a couple of weeks in one of the countries and my accent would just gradually shift, but quite fast. I'd be sounding very New Zealand in a couple of weeks, or very Australian, depending on where I was. Well, it's great to have you here, and you're currently the professor of New Testament at Loma Linda University.
That's correct.
And I thought we might just kick off right there. Just tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing, and then just kind of reach back into your memory banks and tell us how you got there and your experience with Adventism. Were you born into the church? That kind of thing. Where you studied. I'll let you unpack those things as well, and then we'll dig back a little bit into the era of Des Ford and Glacier View. And as you mentioned off air, you didn't really know Des personally that well, but we're going to chat more about the impacts of Glacier View and your thoughts on that. Because you, like me, we were too young to really know what was going on at the time. So tell us about your current work and what led you there.
Well, Loma Linda University is kind of unique in the way it handles religion, because in most Adventist schools of higher education, you have undergraduate degrees where religion plays an important role. You have young people studying for ministry, and then most Adventist institutions are thinking of teaching pastors, perhaps more than anything else. But at Loma Linda, we don't teach pastors except for a few chaplains. It's all focused on the healthcare context, and so that means it's a different kind of teaching. It's a class full of scientists, a class full of healthcare people, and more than half of them are people of other faiths, and many of them are people of non-Christian faiths and no faith. So I'm finding that a totally different challenge than teaching at a seminary. So it's kind of good.
That is fascinating. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I'm 13 years at Loma Linda, and so we have classes like God and Human Suffering, Medicine, Humanity, and God, the Art of Integrative Care. You know, that's sort of the doctrine of human nature, how everything all fits together, and healthcare can take advantage of that Adventist understanding to be more effective with people. So it's applying Adventist Christian message to the specific needs of the healthcare industry. And I think generally Loma Linda is considered to be doing fairly well.
I like that because it's kind of offering up the idea of pastoral care, as your frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call it whole person care, and year after year, the medical school at Loma Linda finishes #1 in patient care among all the graduating classes in California. So California must have 20 medical schools, something like that, and
it finishes
in
#1.
That category, at least Loma Linda comes in first. Yeah.
Wow.
Because that's, it's an integration. If you see Adventism as an integration of the whole person, body, mind, and soul is all unified, that has implications for how you treat people who are sick.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Our smaller version of that is here with the SAN, the Sydney Adventist Hospital.
Right.
And
been there many times. Yeah.
Right. It's a wonderful place, and over the years I've known lots of the employees there, from administrators to doctors to chaplains to nurses, and who had relatives and friends work there. Mm-hmm. And when people get that right about treating the patient as the focus, and where you're aiming to treat that whole person, it creates a beautiful environment to not only be in but to work in. From all accounts that I've had from having been in there, both my daughters were born there 6 and 7 years ago. There's a really wonderful atmosphere there, and I'm sure Loma Linda has a similar feel to it. Can you compare the two? There's a similar vibe.
Well, I love the bush all around the hospital there. So that's Loma Linda's more of an urban feel.
Mm.
It's a really tight campus with many buildings. The main medical center is about 90 meters high, and it's much wider than it's tall. So it's it's a massive operation, like nothing else, I think, within Adventism. There's, I think, 16,000 employees, just to give you an idea. Yeah.
I would love to visit there. I
Yes.
love environments that are kind of their own ecosystem.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you could make an amazing what do they call that? The TV shows where the reality TV show of Loma Linda, you know, and just follow all the stories. I
Well, there is
Googled.
the movie called The Adventists, which I think is basically about Loma Linda.
Oh, okay.
I forget what the producer's name was, but he's Doppelmayr, I think is the name.
Right.
He did a documentary on Adventist healthcare.
And this is
I
the
think it's
one that
focused mainly
helped.
on Loma Linda.
This is the one that helped reveal that you guys live longer as well.
It may have been somewhat related, but that was actually a different.
Oh, separate.
It was
Okay.
a different guy who was into the Blue Zone concept and working for National Geographic, etc. And then Oprah came in after that, and Dr. Oz. So, to have Adventism on a very large scale does have impact on society in the way that most churches don't.
Yeah, yeah. I saw those interviews with Dr. Oz and Oprah. I Google Earthed Loma Linda the other day, and there's actually a big. Is it like a highway going or a big road going between the two sides of it as well? Is that right? Or,
Well, no, the major motorway is about a mile away, or I guess
oh, okay.
less than 2 kilometers. The campus is not entirely contiguous. We're more so than we used to be, with some bridges and things, but
Okay.
that's still a job for the future to actually bring it together in a single campus.
Yeah. Okay.
These things take time.
So you've been there for 13 years,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you actually thoroughly enjoy your work there.
It is challenging and interesting. I'm the director of the Center for Understanding World Religions, so we have programs like Islam at LLU, how Muslims feel about the mission and their role in it, and we've had Hinduism at LLU. We were going to have Judaism in April, but that got postponed, etc. So yes, we have all the world religions represented, and many of them are very passionate about the Adventist mission, how it impacts their lives and the public.
When you say you have them there, is there like a classes that they run, or what's the involvement of these other religions?
Well, particularly if you're going to have a medical school, then you have to have a lot of specialists in a variety of areas. Like, where are you going to find 50 Adventist psychiatrists, for example? So inevitably, there'll be people from other faiths, other Christian faiths, and other faiths, period. And in some areas, you have a lot of Hindus. In other areas, a lot of Muslims who specialize in certain areas. And so, one of the things I ask a prospective faculty member is, has God called you to Loma Linda? And it's funny, sometimes Adventists don't know how to answer that question, and Muslims do.
Ah,
I remember one fellow says, yes, I believe God is calling me to Loma Linda for 5 reasons. And he ticked them off. He'd been thinking about it for some time. And I said, I gave him a thumbs up, positive.
Yeah.
This fellow is certainly worthy of consideration.
yeah, because he literally put thought into it.
Yeah. And he had been a student earlier, and he understood the mission. And he said, this is how I want to, do my mission in the future. I feel like this is where I belong.
What's the history of Loma Linda as far as the Adventist Church and Ellen White's involvement with setting it up? And Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was her vision, the idea that we should have a medical school and that it should meet the highest standards. It's because of that that government accreditation is sought by Adventist institutions. Wouldn't have happened otherwise, probably. But she said you have to meet the highest standards, and that means the feeder schools need to meet the highest standards as well. And so that's how it all happened. Interestingly enough, she was provoking people to move to buy the property and everything, even though the conference was against it. The conference saying, no, don't do it. And then she said quietly to John Burden, you go ahead and put the money down on that property. The Lord is behind this, So she was working against the brethren at times. And a fascinating thing was that John Harvey Kellogg at one point early on said it would be easier to build a railway to the moon than for that medical school to succeed.
Wow.
And here we are 110 years later, and Kellogg's own operation is closed down. So anyway,
how wrong was he?
Well, he wasn't right on everything.
No, he was wrong on a few things.
He grabbed things with great strength and opinion, and when you're right, that can be a real plus. When you're wrong, it can steer you in strange directions.
A bit of a car wreck if you're wrong, because you drive with the same passion.
Yeah, that's right.
I think when I interviewed Ron Numbers and Jonathan Butler, I think Ron said that he was working on a book on the life of Kellogg. I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure
that would be interesting. I would want to read that. Yes.
Yeah, I think it'll be
Kellogg was a fascinating guy.
Yeah, fascinating. And the interactions of that time period between Kellogg and Daniels and Ellen White is just, it's an incredible drama. It's just a fascinating, lots of interactions, and when you read letters between them, it's fascinating. And I think Gil Valentine has done some work on Prescott and Daniels as well from around that time period. Now,
particularly Prescott,
yeah. Now, I understand that you've got quite a nice community of Adventists that meet for Sabbath school and church each week. Can you tell us a bit about the Adventist experience of going to church, I guess, as part of the Loma Linda University faculty and scene and staff? What's the church experience like there? Is there one church, or is there a number that people choose from on campus, or?
Well, there's two churches on campus. One has about 7,000 members, and the other has about 1,200. But I live about 30 kilometers away, and we have a church out there called Calamasa.
Right.
And Calamasa has about 1,200 members, and Azure Hills has a couple thousand members, and Crosswalk has 1,000 members. I mean, you've got 100 or more churches within a short distance.
Right. Okay.
And probably, somewhere in the area of 70,000 members. So it's a massive Adventist community, and that's why you can have scientific examination of the difference Adventism would make if everybody was an Adventist. What difference would that make? You can kind of do that at Loma Linda, maybe nowhere else. So that's how that kind of research happened and got into the national and international news.
Yeah. We were, for a while there, we were able to do that on a small scale in Kurrambong.
Yeah. Well, and when I do classes with the medical students on the book Ministry of Healing, which was written specifically to fund Loma Linda, it was a
wow.
Ellen White said, "All right, we're going to write this book and we're going to sell it to help with the fundraising, etc." So it's kind of the Constitution. And one of the things in there is, she says, all other things being equal, our institution should be smaller. And so I asked the students to wrestle with the question 100 years later, is Loma Linda too big? Or if Ellen White were here today, would she say it's too small?
Yeah.
Because one of the challenges with the current healthcare crisis in the United States is all the other centers are coming together. They're amalgamating and creating huge hospital systems of 50, 100, 200 hospitals. Is Loma Linda too small to survive?
It's
So,
relative, isn't it?
yeah, you take the counsel that Ellen White gives in her time and place, and then you say, all right, how does that apply today? And the size is an issue. Is Loma Linda too big or too small? Sometimes I think it's too big. On the other hand, if it was much smaller, we wouldn't have this rich diversity that we have, of all the different religions working together to continue the teaching and healing ministry of Jesus Christ. And they all know that phrase. I mean, everybody's aware of what Loma Linda is about. And that's, it's an exciting context that you won't find anywhere else, it seems to me.
It's one of the first things that comes to mind when you think of Loma Linda. You immediately think of that phrase, Jesus healing in context with community.
Baylor University is the world's largest Protestant university, I believe, and certainly evangelical, born again Christian type place. And we went to visit there just to see how they maintain faith in a huge, research university context, and learn something interesting. They jettisoned the medical school. I said, why did you do that? And the provost said, because we couldn't have an all-Christian faculty and have a medical school. The same problem Loma Linda has. And then I realized that, in a sense, Loma Linda is a bizarre experiment trying to do something Baylor says can't be done. And Baylor's sort of the model of a Christian, university, research university. So that's when I think we really came to appreciate that this ability to have people of so many faiths still trying to pull them together in one mission. It's a bizarre experiment, but at this point, it's a very exciting experiment.
Yeah. Who's kind of the captain of the ship there? Do they call it a CEO or a?
The president is a fellow named Richard Hart, and he's a doctor of medicine and a doctor of public health. And he was born at Loma Linda in the hospital there, and sort of grew up in the system. Right. He's a really great guy. He's not a theologian in any kind of a sense, yet he has his fingers on the pulse of the heart of Adventism in a special way. And I think he's been the right man for the times.
He's an Adventist?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a policy in play that there has to be a certain ratio of Adventist and non-Adventist workers there, of that 16,000, did you say?
Well, the ratio is as many as possible. Of the 16,000, I would say less than half are Seventh-day Adventist.
Right.
And the intent is that the top leadership be Seventh-day Adventist, so that the mission focus can remain. But recently hired a Baptist as dean of the School of Pharmacy, because there just was not any Adventist who was qualified to take that position. So they struggled with that. The other major candidate was actually a Shiite Muslim who had become a Buddhist, but he was so locked into he'd been at Loma Linda for 20 years, and he was so committed to the mission. I mean, he just sort of fit right in.
Yeah.
So whereas the Baptist was coming in from outside. So it's interesting that you had, where you had no choice but to branch out. It made some interesting conversations.
That is fascinating. Yeah. I'm very interested in multi-faith communities hanging out and connecting, and whether one starts to dominate or one that wants to maintain, and quite rightly so, their mission statement, if they start to if that starts to get watered down. I mean, it's a political thing, isn't it? But it's an important thing to keep an eye on.
Well, one of the major Muslim scholars in Southern California told some of us after the San Bernardino shooting, he says, we have an opportunity that's unique in the history of the world. This is his words. He says, this is the first time in human history that all the religions of the world have been brought together in one place in the context of religious liberty. He says, I don't think that's happened anywhere else. And he says, here we have the opportunity to bring reconciliation and healing that was never really possible before. And he said,
Yeah.
we're looking to Loma Linda to take the lead in that because you're already doing it. You know, they look and they see that we already have people of all these backgrounds working on a common mission. So it's
Yeah.
it's a special opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. It's fascinating, and it's working, and I think that's in fact, when you see this kind of thing where people's lives, as Christ was teaching, that your life becomes more abundant. When you see people's lives becoming more abundant, you, what denomination you are, what ideology you're pushing, kind of comes second, and even ideas of Glacier View and the ramifications, you suddenly kind of, it puts things into perspective that really, you know, our calling in life is to help and heal, and to build up and to give people a life more abundant. So I think that's a really
If you believe in the Great Commission, then you have to engage all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and I don't think we've always done that. So
yeah, yeah. So it's good seeing that Loma Linda is doing that, and it seems to be happening quite organically.
mhm.
What union is Loma Linda under?
Pacific Union.
Right. So that's called the PUC,
That's
is it? Right?
California, a couple of and three other states in the southwestern part of the United States, and Hawaii, including
Right.
Hawaii.
Right. And how many unions are there in the United States?
I think there's 8 plus the one in Canada.
Right. And they're all under the NAD.
Right.
Yeah.
hmm
Even the Canadian one.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and you
Interesting.
also have, I think, Bermuda and Guam and a couple of places like that added in.
Right. As a slight side thing, and purely because you would have been in a position to note the ramifications of this, or the response, um, the striving for equality, um, with regards to gender at Loma Linda would be very concise. It would be a very focused on intention to ensure that equality between men and women, with regards to jobs, payment, money, all that would be a high priority. So
Yes.
when the Antonio vote went no, was that a big surprise to a lot of the Loma Linda kind of staff and faculty and admin?
Not really a surprise. I mean, there are large parts of the world that, I like to put it this way, about a third of Adventism would feel it's offensive to God to ordain women. About a third of Adventism feels it would be offensive to God not to.
Yeah.
And so it's not like there's an easy compromise there.
Mm.
And for those who believe that it would be offensive to God to ordain women, then the proposal that you allow local fields to make that decision was not going to fly.
Yeah. Exactly. I wasn't surprised either, actually. I hoped that the various unions and parts of the world could decide for themselves.
hmm
Um, Now, what's your understanding on Ellen White's involvement with setting up the unions? Wasn't she quite keen to head off at the pass this idea of global kingship or kingly rule? And so she was quite involved with setting up the unions, was she?
Yeah, that would be a question to ask Denise Fortin later
Okay.
on, particularly. But yes, that's my understanding, is that
Yeah.
the unions were developed in Australia. The concept was developed in
Mm.
Australia with her encouragement. I think her son was very much involved in that as well. And so when she came back from Australia, brought that idea along with her and promoted it strongly. And it took 2 different sessions, 1901, 1903, to really set up the system we have now.
Because that showed quite a lot of foresight, I thought. With the no vote, and did that kind of fly in the face of her advice, do you think, on how things should run?
It would seem to us at Loma Linda that if she were around, she would have supported it, but who can really know that, you know? But she was very pragmatic. I mean, the union was not developed out of scripture.
No.
It wasn't developed out of a vision, as far as we know. Just, Daniels and Willie White were kind of messing around with this, and she I think that's a good idea. And I think the church as a whole could benefit from that. So she was very pragmatic. She didn't try to micromanage things. She says, well, here's the principle of what I'm getting at. What you're suggesting here seems to make sense in light of that principle. Let's go with it.
Yeah. It certainly, that's where I kind of see Ellen White as being inspirational. That's quite an inspired thing to recommend, particularly, like you say, not based on vision, and possibly going against the status quo of what people were recommending.
Well, it makes sense to me that a theology which says that women are inherently inappropriate for preaching, etc., would go against the grain of somebody that God called, who happened to be female, to preach and to prophesy and to be, in authority over men. It seems to me that coming to this point, Ellen White would said, if you're going to reject these women, you're rejecting me. But again, who can know? Who can know? No. I want to be fair to those who wouldn't see it that way, but
who can know? But there is an element.
Me, it doesn't make sense that she would be against ordaining women when she herself held ordained certificate and didn't bother her that the brethren conferred that on her. So
And even though we can't know for sure, that we can certainly observe the irony, the potential irony in all of that.
Yeah.
I think Dan Jackson, one of his remarks, hooey, I think it was, that he said publicly, was that at a council, or where did he say that? Were
yes,
there?
At the close. No, I saw it. I think I didn't see it live. I saw it the next day, but it was the division year-end meeting, and it's sort of his last hurrah, and so he went off a little bit, and his number two was kind of patting his leg and saying, calm down, calm down.
I could see him leaning over.
Yeah.
I thought, is that his lawyer giving him legal advice? Yeah. It was his number two, was it?
Yep.
What were the, because I mean, we loved it over here because Aussies quite like that kind of, we call it larrikinism, and you're a bit, we quite like people that are a little bit, what's the word? Not sacrilegious, but we don't.
Snippet.
Yeah. We don't. We like to feel that the hierarchy doesn't, just because you're at the top of a hierarchy doesn't make you more important than anyone in the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And so our politics over here, as you would know, and if you watch any Australian news, people are often having a go at leadership.
That's right.
So he won a lot of points. There was a lot of Dan for president for a while there.
Understood. I like him a lot.
Yeah. Do you know him personally?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about him? Is he what's his?
He is what he seems to be.
Okay, I like that.
Dan Jackson is speaks his mind, and he can be even a little more radical privately than publicly. But on that occasion, he let it all hang out. So that's the real Dan Jackson.
I love it. Yeah. Well, if you're in conversation with him, let him know he has lots of Aussie and New Zealand fans. As I'm sure he already does. Put a good word in that we'd love to have him on the podcast as well.
I would imagine that he would be open to that, since I think he's retired as of 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago,
I heard someone mentioned that the other day. Oh, that would be wonderful to include him in this in the podcast, because even though our focus, not that anyone watching this interview, our focus is on Glacier View at the moment, but the podcast has before and will continue on with many other topics relating to Adventism. So maybe when this series is finished, we can approach him, and I'll ask you to put a good word in for us. What about Ben Carson? What's Is there an ongoing connection with him and Loma Linda? Is that where he was based originally?
No, he was based at Johns Hopkins.
That's right, yeah.
If you talk about the 5 top medical institutions in the world, Johns Hopkins would probably be in there, and he was a major player at Johns Hopkins. That's not far from Washington D.C.
Right.
It's in Baltimore, and he goes to Spencerville Church. I met his son there not too long ago, and so yeah. Ben Carson's very much connected with the church,
and he would have an interest in Loma Linda, I guess.
He has been to speak once or twice.
Yeah.
Now that he's in a political role, I think Loma Linda kind of likes to stay out of that as much as it can.
Yeah,
because that can make enemies that you don't need to have.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and that just reminds me of that might be a good segue into the Des Ford kind of topic. I remember soon after Glacier View, and I was just a young person at the time, but in the early 80s, it seemed that if you defended Des or asked him to speak, that you would possibly go on a blacklist somewhere. And even in recent years, when I invited him to speak for us here in Kurrambong, maybe 6 years ago, it was planned to be on the high school campus here in the music hall, and last minute, about a week before, I got a call from the conference president saying that it wasn't to be on Adventist soil. And so it seemed that even recently, after he died, the memorial that was going to be on Avondale College, that last minute pressure came down from above, and they were told not to have Des Ford's memorial service on Adventist soil. So again, it seemed that if you then later on now say, well, I think it should have been, or it defines your status and puts you in jeopardy in some ways of being accepted within the Adventist community.
The last time he was at Loma Linda, the meeting was held in the Campus Hill Church, which is on the campus. It's not the main church where Randy Roberts is pastor, but it's actually renowned because that's the church also used to have Ralph Larson and the sort of the right wing as well. So they just sort of they're open to
both sides,
equal opportunity.
Yeah.
While at the same time saying we are loyal, faithful Adventists. So I was actually asked to chair the panel when Des was there. So that's the last time I saw him face to face.
Now I think that's on YouTube, isn't it? That panel discussion.
I suspect it is.
Yeah, because I think in doing a little bit of research into you, I came across you speaking, and I'm pretty sure it was on that panel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting conversation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try and find it and put the link below later as well. Did you feel that you had to be a bit careful? Like, for example, SDAQ&A, we invite people from all spectrum, all different sides of Adventism to present their views. When George Knight was interviewed the other day, he said, when I look down the list of people being interviewed, they all seem to be more the liberal, progressive kind. But that's certainly not the plan. It's not planned that way.
Mm-hmm.
They just seem to be a little bit more open at the moment than they once were.
Well, I was dean at the time, and I didn't feel like I was under any pressure.
Right. And you didn't have any fallout from it afterwards?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. I mean, you came across as more a facilitator, interested in hearing ideas. You were doing what you're supposed to do in that role, where you're not kind of championing a view. You say, let's hear your views and share them. So let's lead in a little bit to your...
Just for history, earlier that week was the only time I ever met Graham Maxwell.
Oh.
And I think Graham and Des were not exactly on the same page.
Yeah, tell us about that encounter.
And so I said to Graham, in full disclosure, you need to be aware I'll be chairing the meeting with Des this weekend. so I said, he didn't take it. He wasn't mad at me or anything like that. We got along just fine. So,
can you tell us a bit more about that encounter? What he was like, and
Oh, he was delightful. He was he had this wonderful British accent and just a booming, bass voice and so on. A little bit like mine, I guess. And no, we just had a delightful time. It was fantastic. So
Yeah.
I
I've
had a great
actually
time with him.
I've actually had someone in the comments reflect on your voice and how good it sounds, and they want you to go, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash."
Well, as some people would say, it's made for radio.
Yes.
So,
In Australia, we say, "Oh, yes, he has a great face for radio."
yeah.
Not you. I'm not saying you.
Well, I was implying that, so it's okay.
So let's talk a little bit about Des. You did know him personally, but not too much. Can you tell us a little bit about Des and his not his role in your life, but the connection you had with Des?
Well, I think I probably met him 4 times, something like that, and usually it was in these meetings where there might be 30, 50 people or something like that. So in that context, I'd get to size him up, and then maybe afterward we get to talk for a minute or two, something like that. Probably the most significant single encounter would have been that one at Loma Linda more recently, when we were engaging on the platform and stuff, and then he came to visit me in my office for about an hour later on, and so we got to talk at that point. So that was talk about a number of things. I don't remember the details too much, but that would have been my number one. I think twice we engaged each other a bit with email and so on.
When would have been the first time you actually met him face to face? What year?
I would imagine it was before Glacier View.
Oh, okay.
When he was doing gospel presentations around the United States. Probably at the time he was at PUC. He made it easy for him to travel different places. And I was in New York City at the time, so I would imagine it was a meeting in one of the churches or in New York City. And I said, well, I gotta go hear him, because I'd been listening to his tapes at the time and reading some of his materials.
So were you actually at the famous forum, 1979, October 27?
No.
PUC forum? No. But
No,
you'd
I
heard
was
the
not.
tape. You'd heard the tape of it.
Yes, later on I did.
Just a quick aside, Jill is watching and she's said that Des always spoke well of Graham Maxwell. He was a Christian gentleman. They got on well. The differences were theological, so that was a nice little...
Right, and I sensed that very much. In
From
my
him,
visit with
from him as
Graham,
well.
that he's a very, very warm person and so forth. But they had some theological differences, certainly. Yeah.
We had a small group here that kind of started soon after the no vote. It was just a collection that would gather at the local takeaway and chat and have a milkshake and a burger, a vegetarian burger, of course. And it became apparent that we were very much on the same page with women's ordination, and the conversations were very positive. But within 6 months, we realised that all 6 or 7 of us had very divergent theological views. But what was great is that we were able to put that aside and enjoy each other's company, and then the differences in our theology became quite great fodder for fascinating conversations. And I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that it actually is possible to hold divergent views but still get along with people.
Well, I grew up in New York City, and
What
that
part?
makes me half of an Australian, I think, because the personalities are quite similar. So that's what I'm sensing. Because when I came and taught at Avondale, everybody was kind of like saying, "Well, you just fit right in here." And I says, "Well, I'm a New Yorker, and we tend to be a bit sassy and get in each other's face and stuff." And so it kind of felt like home in many ways. But as a young pastor in New York City in the 1970s, I grew up in a German church and a German family, and Germans can be big on performance and doing the right thing and keeping backbone and stiff upper lip and all that kind of stuff. So I think my sense of faith was pretty much on the more legalistic side. And I think Des's message was just what I needed to hear. I think Bob Brinsmead also was influential during that time, during his gospel phase, in that it was a way of expressing the gospel that would allow a legalist to believe that God could save you, without breaking some higher principle than even God.
Yeah.
The legalist, it's kind of like even God can't break the law because it's like this higher principle, and so the idea that you could be saved in spite of all the mess you've made is a tough one.
Yeah.
And, very hard for a legalist to do, and the way Des and Bob expressed it was that in Christ that legal debt was paid, and it was a very persuasive way of going about it. Today I probably wouldn't lean so heavy, and you may have noticed in that panel discussion I kind of pressed Des on, is righteousness by faith the only way that you can talk about these issues?
I liked that question.
Other ways in the New Testament, etc. And but for me, that was the way to express the gospel at that time that I needed. And so I very much appreciated that.
Yeah, well, I think if you can, one of the great things I remember thinking early on as a young boy, even hearing Des here at Avondale, all I remember was him saying the gospel is the good news, and that the word gospel, I think, even means good news. and that your salvation,
word for gospel is the word for good, and the word for report.
That's a good report. And also that your salvation is assured. And I think what was leading up to the Glacier view, and when you listen to the tape of him in 1979, you see this good news, you see this salvation assurance. I think he was just coming up to the edifice, the stone wall, the fortress of Adventism that seemed to be more, as you say, more legalistic. And whether you take your righteousness by faith or your good news or different paths to salvation view, it all still lands on the side of what Des was trying to do. Some scholars will say, but I disagreed with Des on this. Yeah, but I don't think you disagreed on your assurance of salvation. I don't think you disagreed on some of the points of the good news of the gospel. Whereas there were people on the other side who definitely saw Des as a threat. Can you unpack just a little bit more about what Des did for you personally, and perhaps switching on a bit of a light with the good news we're talking about, and then just share a little bit of your thoughts surrounding Glacier View and why others may not have seen it as positively as you now do?
I think one of the big challenges is this: the Adventist pioneers believed and acted on the idea that the gospel message needs structure. It needs an organization. It needs a system that will create efficiency and get the gospel out. And in many ways, the Adventist institution's been very successful at that. When you see the hospitals around the world, when you see the schools around the world, the institutions, etc., the ADRA, etc., Adventism has punched way outside of its weight in terms of being effective in mission and getting it out there. I believe it's now the 5th largest worldwide religious body. Protestantism is split up into many entities that are only loosely connected. But when you got Catholicism, you have some of the Orthodox groups are larger than Adventists, etc. And maybe Southern Baptist might be larger than Adventist, but they're not so worldwide as Adventism is. So somewhere it comes in like about 5th now, which is kind of startling, among Christian bodies. That's an amazing story in a real sense. So the way I like to phrase it is that religion is what human beings do when they perceive that God has done something great in their context. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, the God has been at work, and we want to memorialize that. We want to let people know about it. And so creating a religious institution is a good way to do that. The problem with a religious institution, you see it all the way back in Bible times and through the Middle Ages and so on. The problem is that once you have an institution, over time, it tends to be more and more focused on preserving itself and less focused on the original mission. And I don't think Adventism is immune to what has happened to pretty much every other religious institution over the centuries. And so there is a certain genetic defensiveness that religious systems have toward anything that would threaten the system. And if somebody is challenging a core idea that the majority of the people hold, well, that's a threat to the system, in the sense that if the system goes in that way, it may lose a lot of people of the traditional variety. If it rejects the new ideas, it can lose a lot of people who are disappointed at that. So it becomes an existential threat to the institution when you have too much disagreement on core issues. That certainly touched on core issues, salvation and eschatology. Adventism and Islam are the two great eschatological religions in the world. And so to touch on eschatology was perceived as quite threatening.
That's a really good way to frame the situation that the characters then found themselves in the late 70s.
Right.
Yeah. I really
Just
like
a little incident that might be of interest. Raul Dederin was a faculty member at the seminary at that time, and about a week after the forum meeting, 1979, he was having meetings in the Greater New York Conference where I was a pastor, and I was asked to take care of him and bring him to the airport and so on. We were sitting at the airport waiting for his plane to arrive. Back then you could wait with people at the gate, there wasn't any security. And I just asked him, I says, did you know about what happened last week? And he said, yeah. And I said, what are your thoughts? And he said something very interesting. He said, the investigative judgment would have died a natural death in 20 years. But now that Des has put it front and center, we're going to have to be battling that for the rest of our lives. I don't know how charitable it was, but it was a very fascinating insight that in fact, it has now become a battle that in the 70s, at least, Dederin felt was fading away.
In fact, I've had people say to me that they wish I wasn't talking about it again. From both sides. I think some of the more liberal progressive folk feel that me talking about it just raises it up again, but they're more open to it. They can see the healing in it, and they can see the logic behind it. But a lot of young people
feel about history. You want to learn from it.
Exactly. That's my thoughts on it. A lot of young people say, well, my church is fine and we're great, and you're talking about it and it's kind of stirring the pot a bit. I'm not sure I have a very good answer to them, other than I just can't help asking questions. And that's a fascinating conversation you had. Who was it again at the airport?
Raul Dederin was a theology teacher at the seminary for 40 years or something like that, even was dean for a while.
And he doesn't seem to be casting a judgment on Des. He's just saying, he's highlighting what has now become an irony, that Des was trying to diminish the power and the negativity of what that teaching can sometimes bring into people's lives. And by doing so, it became a point of contention where two sides have fought for the last 40 years over it.
Well, Dederin foresaw that in the next 10 years, there would be a massive conservative reaction that would now focus the whole church for the rest of our lives. And that proved
He
to be
was
true.
right. Yes. Has he written any books? I might go and dig them up.
He was the editor of Volume 12 of the SDA Bible Commentary, and I think he
Okay.
has an article or two in there. That would be the first place to look, I think.
Okay, I'll go and do some digging later.
Mhm.
He was correct, and in many ways, the birth of that concern happened here in Kurrambong with the Concerned Brethren. In fact, it was happening before he predicted it in a way, but the
Mhm.
power and the focus and the momentum and the money and the uh, the coordination of their project didn't really kick in until the mid '80s or so, or even late '80s.
It hit the World Church in at Glacier View. Yeah,
Yeah. Were you guys aware of the Concerned Brethren over there throughout the '80s as much as we were? Like I said,
I was. Yeah,
Kurrambong was the birthplace
yeah.
in many ways.
Hmm.
I grew up with a lot of the Concerned Brethren.
I
There.
got to meet what was the fellow's name? Kent. It was Grenville's father. I don't remember his first name.
Oh yes. Oh, I know all their names. I've just got a mental blank. Someone will write it in the post in the comments.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um,
So I got to spend an hour or two with him in Sydney, I think,
yeah.
in
What was that like?
1988. Oh,
Yeah.
we had a good time. He wasn't an ogre or anything like
No,
that,
no.
and he was just interested in knowing what was going on in North America, and I was interested in
Yeah.
knowing what was going on in his world, and so we
Yeah.
got along fine. Yeah.
I got a lot along with them as well. You'd bump into each other in Kurrambong, or you'd be singing. I'd sing at church or something, and they would be able to,
I
shoot from.
noticed that Australians didn't seem to personalize theological differences the way Americans did at that
No.
time.
They do now,
Yeah.
unfortunately. They do now, um, but back then it was funny because it was almost like you'd have a battle, but then you'd have lunch together, or you'd bump into
Yeah.
each other at the takeaway, and everything was all right.
Hmm.
Like they would have a real go at me about my music back then and my hair, and they'd tell my relatives that they weren't impressed, but they'd say it to my face as well.
Hmm.
Um, and
A
but
good way to defuse that is just say, "Well, I'm not always impressed either, so I
yeah,
understand."
yeah. Well, we would we'd say the same
That
thing
was a
back.
pretty rotten song. I don't know what
Yeah,
made me think of that.
yeah. We would fight back and give as good as we got, and I think
Yeah.
they respected that actually.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think that's why you can then walk off the battlefield and have lunch together, because you respect that you both were speaking your truth.
Hmm.
Ray Kent, that's who it was. Ray
Okay.
Kent. Yeah. Um, so yeah, tell us a little bit more about perhaps what you felt after you heard the news of what happened to Des at Glacier View.
Well, one of the things that happened was after Glacier View, that in itself was disturbing because I was hoping that the church would be open to listening and maybe finding some common ground, etc. And it was disappointing that it didn't turn out that way. But one person who was really, really close to me basically said, after Glacier View, you can be an Adventist or you can be a Christian. You can't be both. And that idea was really troubling to me as a young pastor. And I remember I had a hardwood floor in Brooklyn, New York. And I remember lying face down on that hardwood floor, kind of pounding the floor. And that was, just saying, God, what do you want me to do? And that was truly a tectonic moment for me personally. And I can only give testimony to what I experienced, but it was like a voice in my head, not an audible voice, but I just heard these words at that moment, and it was the disciples never left Judaism, Luther never left the Catholic Church, and Ellen White never left the Methodist Church. They were all thrown out. So my mission is for you to stay, and not to provoke people with unfair criticism, etc., not to provoke people to throw you out, But if you're thrown out for speaking the truth, that will be my indication to you that I've got something better for you. And probably at the time, I wondered if I had long to last. And I have found that in many, many parts of the world, most parts of the world, Seventh-day Adventists are very hungry for honesty, openness, authenticity, and truth speaking, even when it hurts. And sometimes you develop some interesting enemies, if you want to call them that. But on the whole, people have responded with that kind of openness as in a very positive way, and so I'm still here.
Yeah, and it seems like it's more of the conservative fundamental movement that are in the ear of the admin guys at the top. So there's a bunch of people in the middle who would love to just explore ideas and accept each other's differing views. And I felt
The positive thing I take from that is and that is this. I have God's personal assurance that if I'm still here, then God is still with this church. For all of its flaws, all of its challenges, feeble and defective, all that kind of stuff. In spite of all that, for me personally, if I'm still welcome here, then God is still working in this church. And that makes me a Seventh-day Adventist, in spite of all the challenges, in spite of all the things that have happened through the years, in spite of no votes, the things that I felt were positive. If God is working here, then this is a place to be, and I want to be where God is at work. So I'm still here. I'm just going to get a drink of water.
Sure. And while you're doing that, I just want to correct. I said Ray Kent. It's Andrew and a few others have corrected me. It was James Kent. I spoke to Ray Kent the other day on the phone, and that's why his name popped into my head.
Okay.
Of course, Ray Kent is a different person altogether. So James Kent. When I spoke to Bill Johnson, he spoke quite confidently that this current sort of compliance document, which may shift some of the more liberal progressive members' views on their security within the church, it may challenge them a little bit. He seemed quite confident that rational heads would kind of prevail. What are your thoughts on that? We've had six unions warned, 2 were to be reprimanded, but it was downsized to a warning.
Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen, obviously, but I've found the collective wisdom of church leadership is quite remarkable most of the time. And so we'll wait and see how it plays out. But I have a lot of confidence in the collective wisdom. I understand there's some people disappointed enough to leave, some people who think I'm clueless for staying, whatever. But to me, I know most of them personally, and I have a lot of confidence in them collectively.
And there's a wonderful camaraderie amongst teachers, admin, scholars, that is very strong and profound and kind of would exist whether the Adventist Church fell away tomorrow or not. There's something very special I'm noting when I interview, the scholars and the teachers and the administrators. There's a bond there that I think is quite lasting. Like when I was chatting to Lyle Heiss, and he was talking about meeting with Gil Valentine there in Loma Linda, and there's a place where you look down over the complex, and there's a statue, I think, of Ellen White pointing down there, or something like that. And
yeah, the Campus Hill, it's called. It's right. where that church is that I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Well, he was speaking that they both felt this sense of purpose and meaning and connection with each other and the community that they are a part of. Sadly, for my generation, which is a little bit under the baby boomer kind of generation, we didn't feel that because the baby boomers that stayed would kind of huddle off in corners and speak in hushed tones, and they had wonderful camaraderie within their community. But the young people, I was about 16 to 19, I guess, during those years, we were suddenly like, right, where did all those cool young pastors go? They've all left the church. Those guys over there seem to be interesting, but they're not really inviting us into their clique. So we kind of became an even more unusual subculture within a subculture. And maybe that's why I get to ask questions of a wide variety of people, because I've been a bit of an observer my whole life. So if things were to change, though, and you saw these warnings turn into reprimands and they turned into sanctions, and then there was a trickle-down effect and someone knocked on your door and said, look, can you please publicly support the idea that we don't want women to be ordained, and you refused, and then they put your job under threat, how would you feel? And is that at all possible, or am I talking about a totally unrealistic outcome?
Well, I think it's extremely unlikely. And, there's quite possibly, in the next, what's the term, regime or whatever, in future general conference leaderships, these things tend to swing back and forth, from more conservative, more liberal, etc. So over time, the church has tended to be self-correcting, but, as I made that commitment 40 years ago, that I would, follow the guidance that I felt God was giving to me, I would continue to do so.
Okay.
And I try to be at peace with all as far as that is possible. When it becomes not possible, there are times when you simply have to say, here I stand.
Do you think we're potentially heading towards Glacier View Mark II? Similar leadership as part of the dynasty, similar kind of fear to say your views publicly. And I'm not saying this in any way to bring about, this is potential doom and gloom. I'm actually raising the topic because I'm interested in your thoughts on what could have been done differently at Glacier View that current generation could maybe benefit from.
Well, as I understand Glacier View, a group of people was delegated to develop a consensus statement. And that consensus statement was hashed over, was brought to the larger group, was modified, and then was voted, as I understand it. All right. And I understand that when Des read the consensus statement, he says, I can live under that.
Yeah, that's all true.
And then the defrocking, or whatever you want to call it, happened after that on other grounds, which were not decided at the meeting. So, the disappointment is the idea that you have, a group of people coming to a consensus on some things, and then that's not been accepted. I think the same thing happened with the TOSC committee. We were told going in by the chair of the committee that the goal of the committee was to reach consensus as possible, and if not, then to offer solutions. And it seems, if you can't get a consensus from a committee that was actually hardwired to come out on one side, and that committee couldn't come to a consensus, then the only solution that would make sense is a solution that would allow all sides to find common ground. And to me, the Scandinavian approach is the closest thing to a solution there is, in that it respects those who don't want to ordain women. At the same time, it respects those who want to treat women equally. And you can accomplish both of those goals by, in a sense, abolishing ordination which is not a biblical concept, even though the word is in the King James Bible. That's brought a lot of confusion, but ordination is a Latin term and came in centuries after. So we are following a concept and a practice from the same church that brought us Sunday. So for those of us who know the history, it seemed like a logical compromise would simply, go back to the Bible and use biblical terms and let everybody live. But current GC leadership does not seem interested in compromise.
No.
And if that is the case, then it will have to await another generation.
I think, I think that's a very good assessment of it. And I think Ted Wilson, like Neil Wilson, they didn't get the answer they wanted, so they politically lobbied. Neil lobbied for his 10-point statement, and made the scholars that kind of helped put that together unwittingly made sure the points were a little bit more divisive, and I think Des, in all conscience, couldn't go along with those. And I think
if I may be just a little bit defensive for Ted Wilson, we were ordained together 42 years ago, so we do have a long history. And I think what some people don't realize is, while he may have his own personal view on this that I don't hold, it's not one person fighting the whole church.
No.
There are large elements of the church that are supportive. In other words, you have to listen to the church as a whole. And when you listen to the church as a whole, the perspective of Australia and Southern California is in the minority. I think we simply have to face reality. And if I were GC president, I would have to find a way forward to embrace and keep those who think differently than I do. And that simply is the way. So whether it was Wilson or somebody else, I think the larger conservative trend is driven by perhaps a majority of the membership, including a significant minority in North America.
I agree. I think though that Neil Wilson and Ted Wilson take their role as leader very seriously to achieve and present victories and outcomes that are supporting that base. So Neil is there. He is very aware that politically, numbers-wise, many Adventists did not want Des, and so he used his skills to be able to politically bring to bear the defrocking eventually of Des. And I think Ted, and I respect people that can do this. I'm not putting Ted Wilson down. In fact, in many cases I've even said, I think I really value when I can see someone is authentic and sharing their views very clearly. He said his views very clearly, but I think he also knew that if he politically said certain things to certain people in certain parts of the world, the votes would bring about a victory. And both he and his father were very good at, and I don't want to use the word maneuver because that sounds bad, but they were good at going, okay, I'm the captain, you want this result, I'm going to achieve that result. And I respect that. However, if you do paint a picture that your church is about consensus and not dogma and we want to be open, you have to challenge some of these leaders when they appear to be making decisions that go against what Ellen White was even counselling. So I'm not criticizing him in a sense of him as a person. I totally get what he and his father were doing, and in many ways they were sticking up for what is in the very DNA of the Adventist Church. So maybe the more liberal people need to say, well, maybe we are already a church within a church, and let's define that a little bit more instead of going head to head all the time. Do you think that other colleagues at the time reacted similarly to you? Like, how did the other colleagues react?
At
Other
the time, I
colleagues
was,
at the seminary at the time, yeah.
yeah. Well, I was a local church pastor at the time of Glacier View. So I would not have my finger on the pulse of scholars, etc., at that time. But I can say that Glacier View and the whole thing had two major impacts on the seminary. And one of those was the development in the curriculum of what was called modules, that every student would have to have 2 courses in salvation, 2 courses in covenant, and 2 courses in eschatology. And one of those, for example, in salvation, one of those would be theology course, the other would be a New Testament course. In covenant, one of them was an Old Testament course, and the other was a theology course. And then eschatology, I think, was also New Testament. It was New Testament and Old Testament, I think, for eschatology. So there was the idea of seeing these issues from a variety of perspectives, and I thought those were very good. So perhaps the unintended consequence of Des's actions were to provoke the seminary into a more salvation-centered curriculum and an honest look at the exegesis of eschatology and things like that. The other thing that changed.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but you're saying kind of the curriculum actually changed
Yes,
as a
yes.
result. Yeah,
And
sorry
the
to
other
interrupt.
part that changed was a course called the Sanctuary. And that was taught by about all 6 departments. And you had Old Testament professors, New Testament professors, theology professors, all involved in a portion of the class. Very unusual, kind of a team teaching kind of thing. And that went on I was involved in that for something like 20 years. And it was a very productive thing. And I think some of the weaknesses in the sanctuary doctrine were honestly dealt with. And some solutions to some of the challenges were brought forward, and I think were well received. Toward the end, the students were less and less plugged into Glacier View. The young people didn't even know what it was. So to teach the class in relation to Glacier View didn't make any sense, certainly in the last 20 years or so. But that the sanctuary is certainly a central metaphor for salvation within Adventism is true, and it's also in the Bible, central metaphor. So to know about that, I think, was a productive part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So another unintended consequence of Glacier.
And a positive one. It's interesting, isn't it? Because both you and I have reaped the benefits of hearing the good news, of feeling a sense of assurance and hope in salvation. And you were saying with the guy Dedrin, if Des hadn't said anything, that might have just dropped away anyway. We'll never know. So we look at the positives. So here is this good outcome, affecting even curriculum at a university level, which helped students coming through focus more on grace and righteousness by faith.
And also the Daniel and Revelation Committee probably wouldn't have happened without Glacier View. And that, in my personal experience, was the most positive and most exciting, scholarly development of my lifetime. Where you had 25 or 30 of the top Daniel and Revelation scholars in the world getting together for like a week at a time for many years. For me, what a learning experience, to have Arthur Furch and Gerhard Hazel and Mervyn Maxwell and Bill Johnson and so on, have these guys interacting with your material, year by year. That was, for a young guy, that was exciting.
Phenomenal experience, yeah. And I guess just touching back to Neil and Ted, if you're having all these positive outcomes occurring and you're seeing this growth and you've got Jan Paulsen as president and you can think positively about, unity through diversity, regardless of if we like the Ted Wilson and the Neil Wilson approach, these effective politicians, regardless of the respect we have for them, we also can be slightly threatened by their ability to be effective as well. And I guess that's what I'm referring to before. If we're trying to find some way to not repeat what happened in the past, I'm wondering what advice you would kind of give now without, again, we're not criticizing or shaming Ted or anything like that, but what advice can we give to people who don't want to see the same kind of cataclysmic events occur again?
Well, I think being positive voices, and that means knowing the other side on the issues. I've had the tremendous privilege through the years of doing seminars and teaching classes in Africa, South America, Asia, Australia, etc., around the world, Europe, etc. So being on all 6 inhabited continents and having the opportunity to teach and so on, you learn a lot doing that as well, because your students are each coming from a different perspective. And just for example, one thing I've discovered during this pandemic, the Zoom pandemic, is that the #1 issue right now outside the Western countries seems to be the Sunday law. That's what people are buzzing about. And the reason they're buzzing about it is because it's the one clear, specific sign of the end that you can actually say, hey, when this happens, we know that we're there. So I have been pushed to do an intensive study of, how the Sunday law concept came to be, what its biblical roots are, the things Ellen White said about it, and how all of that fits in with what we learn from the Bible about prophecy in general. And it's been quite an interesting study. So you can use that type of specific fascination by people to teach them some things about how prophecy works. Here you have an unfulfilled prophecy. Well, how do you understand unfulfilled prophecies when we tend to get them wrong all the time? Well, you go back to the Bible and look at fulfilled prophecy, and you see how God moves from prediction to conclusion, etc. And you discover that, first of all, God is consistent. So there are patterns in what God does. Second of all, God is not predictable. Sometimes he doesn't fulfill everything that he says he will do.
Look at Jonah.
Because things happen, circumstances change. And, look at the Jonah story. Third, God is creative. He's constantly doing new things. So you put those 3 together, and unfulfilled prophecy calls for a little more tentativeness than we tend to do. I think most Adventists look at a thing like the Sunday law and they say, well, she said it, so it's going to happen exactly that way. But that's not the way the Bible worked. And I think to apply biblical principles to the Bible but not to Ellen White is to denigrate her prophetic role. If she is a prophet along the lines of the biblical prophets, then she is subject to the same rules of engagement that God applied to the prophets in the biblical times. And so that teaches people some dynamics that they would not have known otherwise, and can maybe have that's what I mean, being a positive voice and saying, okay, you guys are interested in this detail. So rather than me just saying, hey, you run down that road and you end up blowing up Nashville and all kinds of stuff, crazy stuff, you've probably heard about. That hermeneutic, in a sense, is a dead-end hermeneutic, but you don't get anywhere telling people your hermeneutic stinks, so that's why you're talking silly. No, you say, let's go to the Bible and let's reshape our hermeneutic based on what the Bible clearly teaches. And then with a fresh understanding, maybe people can start coming together in a more positive and healthy way. So is it often a fool's errand? Perhaps so. But if you are where God wants you to be, you speak and you do your best to move things forward and let him worry about it. If it gets kiboshed in a way that's detrimental to God's mission in the world, that's his problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
I
right.
like,
He's asking us to do all we can to move
mm,
things in a positive direction. If
mm,
they don't go in a positive direction,
mm,
it's God's problem to deal with, and he's
mm,
going to finish this work with or without us. So
yeah, I like that.
if the
It's like,
church goes belly up, God's still going to succeed. So
yeah.
I don't have to micromanage the church to a certain outcome.
Mm, mm,
If other leaders feel differently, they might find themselves one day working against God. So
mm. I like that.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I like that. I think in trying to stave off, another Glacier view, you could lose sight of just speaking your truth and continuing on. I mean, in what you were saying there about prophecy, I've learned a couple of new things, and it's very interesting and uplifting and inspirational. So if we can keep being inspirational to people, then let God take care of the politics.
Yeah.
Takes a bit of the pressure off.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for that. Can we dig back into the Daniel Revelation Committee? I know that played a big part in your life. Can you tell us what impact you think Des had on the committee, and what role did you have?
Here's an interesting piece. I can't speak to the first 5 years of the committee where they focused on Daniel and Leviticus and the sanctuary. When I arrived to deliver two things. One was hermeneutics, how you handle the book of Revelation hermeneutically, how you see its relationship to the Old Testament and the New Testament and all the rest of that. So I had a paper on hermeneutics and a paper on the seven trumpets. And I remember specifically Bill Johnson saying, after hearing my paper on hermeneutics, he basically said, folk, he says, I think this is a shift in this committee's work. I says, what we're hearing here. He says, up until now, it's all been a reaction to Des Ford. And what I'm hearing here is that there are other issues coming in the future, and we need to understand the biblical material exegetically, so that whatever comes, we can face it from a more solid basis. In his view at that point, I think that was true. The committee focused less on trying to answer what Des was saying from that time on, and began to say, well, what does Revelation actually say? What is the Bible actually saying? And so it wasn't so much polemical anymore, but it was
What
now
year was that?
a more positive approach to building a foundation for the future. That was 1986. So the first 5 years, I think, was largely, what would you call, apologetic?
Yeah.
And after that, it became more scholarly and scientific, I think. And perhaps I had a role in moving that shift a little bit.
How different was it to the Palmdale 1976 gatherings on the similar topic?
Well, I wasn't at Palmdale. I read some of the documents related to it. It seems to me that the church has generally operated at the level of what we call systematic theology, where you're raising a question, in our terms, a philosophical question, and then you're going to the Bible looking for answers. And that is a valid approach. But it wasn't the approach for my personality. I started out teaching theology, and I didn't feel at home in that, because really what I was presenting was my ideas and trying to justify them with scripture. So, one way to approach the Bible is you raise the questions and then see what the Bible has to say about it. I prefer to go to the Bible, let the Bible ask its own questions, provide its own answers, and then on that basis say what here applies today. So you can go two ways. You can start from today and go back and see what the Bible says to our questions, or you can see what the Bible was originally trying to say and then say, what are the implications of that for where we are today? And that was my preferred approach. It isn't right or wrong, but it was my preferred approach. And I think Darcom shifted things from Palmdale, et cetera, where it was more systematic theology. we were talking righteousness by faith, and those are biblical terms, but we were putting our meanings into those words. Krister Stendahl was a famous Harvard scholar in the 1950s who wrote a substantive article on Luther and the introspective conscience of the West. And he brought to people's attention that while Luther grounded himself in the book of Romans, he was not treating Romans the way Paul did. In other words, for Luther, Paul was talking about Judaizers. For Luther, Paul was talking about Catholics.
Yes.
And so Luther took Paul's writing, but infused it with his questions, his issues, and reshaped the church on that basis. And it was a powerful act. But Stendhal was saying, and I think he was right in this, it's time to let Paul be Paul again. And Paul was a Jew, you see, and he was writing to Jews and about Jews. He was not writing to Catholics. And so to simply take that tack with the book of Romans leads you in a very different place.
That's fascinating.
And Graham Maxwell came to Romans from an even different place, where he came to Romans and he said, you need to read Romans in the light of the cosmic conflict, which is not a surface issue in the Bible. You know, as you're going through the Bible, you rarely hear it talking about Satan and talking about heaven and talking about a battle in heaven and all of that. It's only in Revelation that comes into focus. But then Maxwell said, if once you see the cosmic conflict, you begin to see it everywhere. And now Romans is a different book in the light of that biblical concept, that larger biblical concept. And so I think today's scholarship has focused less on the existential issues of what we're facing today and more on trying to say, what exactly was God trying to do back then?
Yeah. Now, I'm just going to pause there for a moment. Where am I going? Hang on a second. Am I here? Yes. Just pause that for a moment. It's a good place to mention, and I totally forgot about this. Today's sponsor of this incredible interview is Modo Sapien. And Modo Sapien has been someone that has spoken often about Graham Maxwell, and it's clear that John Paulien was also very intrigued by and a supporter of Graham Maxwell and the way he viewed things. And so I'm going to mention a few times in today's show Graham Maxwell, and a big thank you to Modo Sapien. Give him a big thumbs up and a thank you in the chat, everybody. One of our regular members here on SDAQ&A, and he is particularly wanting to sponsor and head people into the direction of speakingwellofgod.org, and check out Conversations About God and Can God Be Trusted. Now, I think also he's keen to highlight, just bringing up my message, we love speaking well of him, which is another part of that same website, I think. So let me just bring that onto the screen so you can all check out what we're talking about. Hopefully you can see that and still hear me. Is that correct? So here's the website, speakingwellofgod.org. And today's program has been sponsored by Modo Sapien, who is directing our attention to a lot of this incredible content of Graham Maxwell. We've heard about him. He had a big influence back in the day. And I've even chatted to Moto Sapien about the concept of doing a legacy program where we look at some of his videos, discuss his impact, and tease out what was he actually saying. Where did he and Des disagree? As Gillian said in the chat, Des and Maxwell were good friends, but they disagreed in some areas. So thank you, Moto Sapien, and we will return to a bit of a plug on that again in a few moments. But everybody thank Moto Sapien, the sponsor of today's program. Thank you very much. And I apologize for the delay in getting you mentioned. You know, here we are an hour and a half in, and I usually mention it right at the start. So I do apologize for that. But yeah, better late than never. And I encourage everybody to go and check out speakingwellofgod.org. Back to the program.
I mean, he chose to give revelation then, not now. But to read it as if it was written to us is wrong on the face of it. So what was God doing when he gave revelation in 95 AD and not in 1995? And if you understand that properly, you might have a more intelligent approach to our problems today and a more biblical one.
And if you could transplant that approach back into the first 20 years of the 20 years post 1844, you might have had some different outcomes as well.
Well, there was one scholar, and that was J.N. Andrews. And that's why Andrews University was named after him. J.N. Andrews knew his Greek and his Hebrew. And he was more of an exegete. He actually wrote a book on the three angels' messages, which is the most exegetical approach to revelation of that whole era. And Uriah Smith's book was strongest in the areas where he was following Andrews, and not so strong when he was following Alexander Keith and other voices, which were not so exegetical.
When was the heyday of Andrews?
Well, Andrews became a major player in the mid-50s, 1850s, and died in 1883 in Switzerland, I think.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the take you've had on these topics, and I think let's put you now back into that 1986 time frame where you potentially even influenced instead of making it an apologetic discussion, okay, let's now look at the relevance of Daniel Revelation to Adventism from a biblical perspective. Tell us a little bit about how that shift in perspective created a shift in the study process and some of the outcomes.
Well, exegesis is, in my simplistic way of expressing it, asking the question, what was the writer trying to say? You know, when Paul sat down to write Romans, what was he trying to say to the Romans? And so that puts you back in the first century. It causes you to ask what words like righteousness and faith actually meant back then. And it causes you to focus on the text in its original context, etc. And the importance of that is this. We all come at everything from our own personal history. The language I speak is a language I learned in context. And so when I read a Bible in the English language, every word of that Bible has a triggers to my own past experience, my own personal experience. So when I read the Bible in English, there's all too much a danger that I reshape it into my own image. The neat thing about Greek and Hebrew is that you're not learning those languages as they are in today's world, in Greece and in Israel, for example. You're learning those languages as they were back in the first century. And that breaks you away from the comfortable associations with those words that you have because of your English language background. And so in breaking you away from our world and setting you back in the writer's world, there's a fair chance you might understand the Bible more the way God originally intended it than otherwise. And the corollary of that that's interesting for Adventism is with Ellen White, we're reading in the original language. But because that language is also our language, we tend to read into Ellen White the meanings
Yeah.
that language has
Yeah.
for us today. And so we can often say, well, Ellen White would have said this today.
Mm.
Well, no, she would have used her own language today, and it might have been different than what you think.
Yeah.
You're
And George
taking her
Knight.
words, you're filtering them through this language system that you inherited,
Mm.
and now you have the Ellen White for today, but it
Yeah.
might not at all be the Ellen White who, had she lived another 100 years, would be today.
And that's what was interesting with the George Knight interview. He was constantly putting back to the context
Yeah.
of Ellen. When you, and I wish I could do this, and I envy people like yourself, and I've experienced it in music. So I'll just quickly share what the parallel, and I'm interested in your thoughts if you've had the similar experience when you've studied Greek and Hebrew. As you first start learning how to play lead guitar, which is something young guitarists love to explore, you're trying with a limited amount of information, and you're enjoying it, and you're watching other people that can do it, and then you stumble across the pentatonic scale and the minor and major pentatonic scale, and then you grasp the passing notes, and then you learn the 5 positions of each of those pentatonic scales along the neck of the guitar, and then you start being able to play in a way where you're not thinking about the notes so much more, you're grasping and appreciating the music, and then you invariably stumble across the 7 modes and how each chord relates then to a different scale, and you're suddenly faced with what I think is what people who suddenly stumble across Hebrew and Greek in their particular mode of expertise, and you're excited, but you're aware that if you cross this kind of river now, the one that is in the guitar world, the modes, you are going to have a whole new understanding of music. Yes, you'll still enjoy it at the real basic level, but it'll suddenly have a revelation to you that you can only really experience when you understand that language of music and those modes and those scales. And it's a beautiful moment when you grasp it. Is there a similar moment that perhaps scholars and academics come to when they're studying Greek and Hebrew, when all of a sudden the Bible just takes on this like an aha moment? I'd love to hear your unpacking if there's a similar thing.
Absolutely. Two exercises that I gave my students at the seminary. I taught at the seminary 25 years. So I was teaching pastors for 25 years, and then I Loma Linda as an administrator, and then now a teacher of medical students and nurses and so on. So 2 exercises I did particularly had that impact on students. One was teaching them how to put Revelation side by side with Old Testament texts, and to look for words and themes and structures and stuff, an intense analysis of comparison of texts. And the students would come back, after a couple of months and working on these projects, you could see them walk in the door with their eyes shining and say, wow, for the first time in my life, I'm learning from the Bible.
Yes.
I've been a pastor for 10 years, but I was preaching from books and preaching from what other people had said about the Bible. I'm learning from the Bible.
Yeah.
And the other exercise was Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You have synopses where Matthew, Mark, and Luke are laid side by side, and you give people 4 color pens. Yellow, green, blue, and pink. I think is the colors I usually recommend. And every word that's in all 3 Gospels in a particular story, you put in yellow. And all the double connections you put in green, blue, and pink. And when you're done, every word in those 3 Gospels that's not in the other 2 is exposed. It's unmarked.
Yes.
And suddenly the unique perspective of the gospel writer starts coming in. And you just see the students coming in, and they're kind of like, I just got 100 sermons today. It's just unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah.
And you're learning from the Bible. Nobody's teaching you to see certain things.
Yeah.
You are just being forced to observe. And in the observing of it all, the Bible makes itself known to you.
Yeah.
Now, some good news for all the non-scholars who are listening, and that's probably most of you. I do suggest an approach for those who will never learn Greek and Hebrew that can have similar results. And that is, first of all, use a variety of translations. In other words, compare English Bibles on a given text, and you'll discover something that you would also learn in Greek or Hebrew. Some texts are clear, some texts are not. And if you want to build your faith on a solid rock, you want to go to clear text, not unclear text.
That's very good
And
advice.
so you find that out by comparing English translations. If all 5 translations agree, it's a clear text. I saw one of those just today. All 5 of the translations I had in front of me all said exactly the same thing, word for word. It's a clear text. If all 5 are saying something a little bit different, it's not a clear text. If 4 of them agree 100% and one of them's way off in left field, now you've discovered the bias of that translator. And every translator has a bias. Every translation has a bias. And so little by little, you are discovering the kinds of things you would discover in the original language. And it's breaking you away from a comfortable translation that you're used to, but seeing that, no, there's a dynamic going on here. Another one is spend majority of your time reading the text rather than playing with a concordance. You can use a concordance to create anything you want to say about from the Bible. But to read puts the author in charge.
Yeah, it's like over-analyzing theory.
Chapter 2, before chapter 3, the author put it together that way. When you read, the author's in charge. And the third one is to spend the majority of your time in the clear text of the Bible, not the unclear. And the multiple translations helps you determine which are the clear texts. If you spend the majority of your time in the unclear text, like David Koresh, you will go crazy.
Yeah. And a lot of that can happen intuitively. Like when I was obsessed for a while there with the rock and roll period of 1956 to 1976, just by way of what a fascinating era, you know. And so I read everything. It took me about 15 years, not my full-time job, but I read everything I possibly could on every band, every artist, autobiographies, biographies, and you gradually have this intuitive image that, yeah, there's some stuff over here that's mentioned once or twice, but it may or may not be true. So don't spend all your time digging into that part of it. But then you'll hear certain stories told, and they're not always exactly or accurately told the same way, but you then start to get a feel for it. And I think I'm just paralleling so I understand it better, what you're saying. I think, you know, this, by reading many different versions, you gradually and intuitively start to get a feel for what it's saying.
At least for what is clear and what is not. And it's the clear text that will ground you solidly. You know, I remember one of Des's sermons was sort of on that line, Things Which Cannot Be Shaken, this title. And when you focus on the clear texts of the Bible, you get a sense of the things that are not up for debate. And to make those the center of your faith is a solid ground, I think. And we need it in today's crazy world. We need a solid ground.
And I think you've offered some really good suggestions for lay folk like myself to begin exploring some of these juicy parts of the Bible. I mean, juicy as in the good stuff, those awakening moments.
Yeah.
Because not everybody is going to be able to study or grasp the 7 modes of music theory, scale theory. It's interesting, in one last metaphor with the music, in my years of being obsessed with playing guitar, not many teachers could clearly pass on the information of these 7 modes to me. There was I could literally count 3 or 4, maybe 5. And then as I was excited about it and imparting this knowledge to my students at the time, even though I was joyous and excited and I could see the penny dropping for lots of them, only a handful of those students grasped what I was saying as well. And it must be a little bit like that for you guys academically and with the scholars. You know, you are taking it to the next level. You are listening to people that have explained the complexities of Hebrew and Greek and the study of the Bible. And so there's the camaraderie again amongst the musicians and the academics who understand this stuff. You're looking up to teachers such as Des Ford, perhaps, who were able to impart this knowledge. You yourself have grasped the 7 modes and you're passing this knowledge on. So there's a collective camaraderie there. And what you're doing is also making that understandable to a lot of people that may never grasp the full in-depth nature of it. But I have noticed, and I wish I was a part of it, as I do feel a part of it with other musos. I wish I could grasp this Greek and Hebrew and fully understand what I know that you guys know. And you've kind of inspired me to now get out 5 or 6 different versions of the Bible and go for it.
My wife actually has a Bible that has 4 facing versions on the page. So you have 2 on one page and 2 on the other. And she does the Sabbath school lesson each week, just going down through those pages and stuff. And it's amazing the things that she can come up with. At Andrews, I had the privilege of taking people deep into my world.
Yeah.
At Loma Linda is the opposite.
Ah, yes, you were saying earlier.
I need to get deep I need to get deep into their world and then say, what of all these things I've learned about the Bible is going to make any difference in their world? That for me is a much tougher thing to do.
Yes.
And, you know, at my age, very invigorating and challenging to completely reshape my own thinking in a new context.
Yeah. It's an exciting thing because when you see the light go on to people that may never grasp the complexities, but when they see the total value of getting it.
Yeah.
And walking away, like you said, that pastor went away going, I've got 100 sermons out of this now because of that little epiphany. Do you think that just back to the Palmdale, I don't know what they even called it. Like, was it a
conference?
Conference, was it?
Palmdale conference is what I remember.
And because it was because the minutes of that were never kind of revealed. Is that because they kind of gave up in the end, realizing they could never make all the parts fit together like was expected of them? Yeah.
What I came away from some of that is you have an issue of people, like I was saying about Luther and so on before, people who are defining terms, asking the questions of the Bible, but they were asking from their own perspectives. And thus the same text meant something different to each, And so if you got 2 sides studying the Bible and each text means something different to both sides, you're never going to come to agreement. And that was a challenging thing. When that happens in a local church, the only hope a pastor has is to raise people up to some higher level where the 2 sides both can play a role.
Yeah.
And one example I was just working with right now, I have a class for nurses in the 28 fundamental beliefs of Adventism. And I was just getting into the Trinity now. It's a couple months away, so I've got a lot more to go through. But the Trinity is an example. You have the 3 and you have the 1. It's almost impossible for a Western mind to get into that. It's crazy on the face of it. And yet, after 2 centuries of wrestling, that's where the church ended up. It wasn't driven by Greek philosophy. It was driven against Greek philosophy because it didn't make sense to Greek philosophy, both God being both 3 and both 1. And so there's a tendency, if one group of people is defending the oneness of God and the other group of people is defending the variety within God, they will read each text differently. And my sort of personal thing through the years has been, can we find some common ground where we can benefit from both sides? And I like to think of the 4 Gospels as teaching us that there's more than one right way to think. I think in Palmdale, you had two sides that were absolutely convinced they had the right way to think on the subject.
Mm.
And because they couldn't open themselves to two right ways to think.
Mm.
I'm not saying every way to think is right, but there's more than one right way to think. I mean,
Mm.
who was right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Which of them is right?
Mm.
Stupid question.
Mm.
Because they're all bearing an authentic witness to who Jesus was. But
Mm.
Jesus was way more complex than any writer, even any inspired writer,
Mm.
could accomplish. And with that being the case, you just have to say there's more than one right way to think.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, there was a conference 2007 at Andrews University, and at that conference, it was on questions on doctrine.
Mm.
At that conference, you
And
had
you were
George
there?
Knight. I was there.
Oh,
You
wow.
had
Tell us
George
about
Knight.
it. Mm.
You had Angel Rodriguez. You had Colin Standish, Russell Standish. You had Herbert Douglas. You had the whole panoply
Wow.
of those who had made questions on doctrine kind of a center of their life and mission. And my role there was basically to give that message, to start with the four Gospels and say, there's more than one right way to think.
Yeah.
And I somehow think that had a certain impact, that people began saying, maybe the way I'm thinking, it could be right, but it doesn't mean
It's
these
the
other
only
guys
right.
are totally wrong.
Yeah.
Tony Campolo had a wonderful book, I Have Met the Enemy and They Are Partly Right. And I think that's a brilliant statement,
Yeah.
a really important statement. So
Are there recordings or minutes from that 2007?
I honestly don't know.
I would love to track that down.
Yeah.
Maybe
Denis
some.
Fortin was the dean at the time, and he took a lot of flack for hosting that conference. You want to ask him about that.
I'll ask him, yeah.
And even got a call from very high place saying, shut that meeting down.
Wow.
And he said, we're scholars, we're getting together, and what scholars do when they get together is they talk, and we're going to talk. And that's what we're going to do. You're not going to shut it down.
It was shut down, was it?
No, it was not.
Well.
He simply said no. He says, this is a scholarly meeting, and we're going to talk. And
how was it having the Standish brothers involved there? I mean, Russell, did you say Russell was there?
Russell and Colin were both there.
Wow.
And on Sabbath, I got to tell you this story. On Sabbath, they had a communion service. And in the front, you had Angel Rodriguez, the head of BRI. You had George Knight, and you had Colin Standish ministering communion. And the tears were rolling down my cheeks. Yeah. I was just absolutely, to see that happen was a glimpse of something far greater than most of us ever achieve.
I reckon.
And I looked to my right. I was standing next to Dave Larson, Ralph's son. And he looked at me, and his face was a mask of tears. And we were just looking at each other, and he said, if only my father could have lived to see this.
Wow.
It was just a deep and touching moment. So that was a historic conference, and I hope that, there is they probably didn't record it just so everyone could speak freely.
Someone has written here saying that there are papers online from the Questions on Doctrine conference, but whether they are commentaries or summations, I don't know.
Oh, the papers would be good to read. It would give a sense of what people brought to it, but the dynamic that happened there was pretty special. And I remember after it was over, I was just over at the girls' dorm for some reason or other and ran into Colin and Russell Standish, and they were all concerned that their ride hadn't come to pick them up to take them to the airport and so on. And so I spent some time just interacting with them and saying, look, let's wait 10 more minutes. If the ride doesn't come, I'll take you to the airport, and we just bonded kind of there.
Yeah, I love
Colin stayed in touch for many years after that, and we became friends over that. So I'm truly committed to the idea there's more than one right way to think.
Mm.
And even if somebody just seems to be totally off, there's got to be something there that God can teach me.
Fascinating insight there. This is Peter back in 2026, just jumping forward from 2020. And today's interview with Dr. John Paulien. Just to let you guys know, as I mentioned earlier, it is sponsored today by Modo Sapien. And Modo Sapien has donated some money to today's show to especially encourage viewers to go and check out speakingwellofgod.org. Modo Sapien has spoken often about Graham Maxwell and how he appreciates his take on the gospel. And so he is sponsoring today's program and making it a reality as I get 86 of season 2's episodes out into the general public, out on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. It's going everywhere today. And I think 6 different channels we are now going live to. And I just want to thank Modo Sapien for being today's sponsor, for making this show possible, and for encouraging us to go and check out the website speakingwellofgod.org. Go and check it out. And especially conversations about God and can God be trusted. They're all available there for free from speakingwellofgod.org. Thank you very much, Modo Sapien, regular viewer and contributor and supporter here at SDAQ&A. And yeah, really appreciate your support. And I encourage everybody, go and just check out Speaking Well of God. And now back to 2020 as we continue this fascinating interview with Dr. John Paulien, who at the time, a lot of people have been asking, was an employee and an Adventist. And my understanding is that he still is an employee. I don't think he is retired yet. Back to the program. Just an interesting note, Michael W. Campbell has written here, yes, it is available online. I was one of the organisers that came up with the idea. So
there you go.
Michael, we'd love to interview you on some questions on doctrine topics.
If I'd have known Michael was here, I just turned it over to him. But yeah, so my recollections are mine, but the conference was amazing. And I'm grateful to Michael and Julius Nam and all those who helped put it together.
I didn't realize he was here either. So, and he's put a link, which will be good to follow up. And audio recordings are available too. So that's exciting. Awesome.
That would be special, I would say, the audio.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate you putting that there. And we'll certainly track that down. Also, someone has written, was Des invited to that at all?
My impression was that he wouldn't, Michael could maybe answer that, but my impression is he wouldn't have been invited simply because he was not known for that. Yeah. I think he was part of those battles probably in the 50s and 60s as a younger person, but he didn't become known for speaking to those issues directly. I think so. Maybe that might be a reason. I mean, if you're inviting the Standish brothers, I don't think there'd be a political reason not to invite Des.
And Michael, just to highlight, I'm super obsessed with questions on doctrine, so please contact me. It's interesting when we've had several speakers talk about this kind of moment where you see let's use the polemic Standish brothers, the CBs, with the more with people like Des, where you see actual moments. Norm Young in his interview talked about he and Athol Tolhurst walking the streets of Kurumbong of an evening and having dinner together when they were both retired and living near each other. And they're lovely feelings, and they do bring a lump to your throat. But boy, the CBs were mean-spirited at times too, weren't they? And I don't want to kind of just let them off the hook totally for some of the outrageous things they've done. Not that I'm asking you to speak on that, but I just wanted to throw that in there in
Yeah,
defense
well,
of people like Des that were very badly treated.
I think one of the things I've really come to, this is a Loma Linda concept, but at Loma Linda, the basic idea is if you look carefully at Ellen White, I remember Dave Larson once saying very early in my tenure there, he said, Adventists generally talk about Ellen White. At Loma Linda, we read Ellen White. There's a difference between mining her and talking about her and actually just reading and getting the larger sense. If you read Ellen White, it seems that the key message of Adventism is God is love. You don't hear that much.
No, I would have thought it was more get ready for Jesus.
Well, but you read the statements that she makes on, and the first 3 words of the conflict series is God is love. The last 3 words is God is love. Steps to Christ, the first chapter, God is love. You see, and so the question arises: how can that be? Everybody preaches God is love. The evangelicals are all about God is love, but there's an interesting feature, and that is the evangelicals teach God is love and everlasting burning hell. And it's hard to, you can grasp with your mind, God loves me, but if you believe in an everlasting torture and hell, that qualifies the love of God and makes it insecure and uncertain to a large degree. And so at Loma Linda, we would make the point that if God is love is the most important of all Adventist messages, it's because God was seeking to cleanse that idea from the qualifiers that would undermine it. And unfortunately for Adventism, we do have some undermining qualifiers as well. One of them is the judgment. The idea, oh, I hear one of my cars going off. I'll be careful what I press in my pocket. The judgment idea, as it is commonly, does not portray a beautiful picture of God. It's the idea, you see the fellow standing there with his head down, and Jesus got his hand on his shoulders, and he's pleading with this light out there, could you please take this guy in? I can vouch for him, and so on. And you're standing in jeopardy. And I think Des may not have framed it in the way I'm doing it now, but I think that motivated a lot of his thinking. The idea that the judgment concepts, as popularly taught, undermined the character of God. It made God look bad in many ways. So God's mission for Adventism is to teach the love of God without the distracting kinds of things that would undermine it, even as you're talking about it. And that for me has been a development in the last 10 years. I think that I probably, with that legalistic background, legalism is another issue that undermines the love of God, because it's saying, God won't be on your side until you do certain things. And the message of Scripture is that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself. And Christ loved to such a degree that the people nailing him to the cross felt the power of his love. And some of them were converted, including a Roman centurion. So it's stunning, the love of God that was manifest in Jesus Christ. When you truly grasp that, we have so many ways of undermining that. It's amazing.
It's interesting that what you're saying there and what Des was saying potentially was that this is just putting that focus back, that the good news is that your salvation is assured because God is love. Why do you think Ellen went to great pains to suggest that when the New Jerusalem landed back on the earth and the evil made one last run at the at the kingdom that when God, destroyed them, that those that were more sinful would burn longer. Why did she want to throw that in there if she's also pushing? And again, you'll probably say, well, you can pick up anything from Ellen White. There's good and
Yeah,
bad.
I'd like to ask her that too. So good question. I will make one observation for what it's worth. What they experience at the end of the millennium is what we call second death. And Revelation's very clear on that. Second death is complete and permanent absence from God. That's the consequence. And it's not because God doesn't want you, it's because you do not want God. So those who are so-called wicked are people who just, in spite of every evidence, still say, I don't want God as part of my life. And God doesn't force them. God accepts their decision. Now, the interesting thing, and Des might not have liked this, but I'll just throw it out there. The interesting thing is that we have only one example of second death in all of galactic history, and that is the cross. And the question is, did God kill Jesus?
Well, he obviously did.
God killed Jesus on the cross?
Well, if you knowingly place your son into a situation and the end is going to be him being nailed to a cross, then by virtue of knowing what the outcome is, you've in effect caused it, allowed it, done it.
Well, let me push back gently. Was it God who killed Jesus, or was it sin?
Well, who created sin?
You go back to Gethsemane, and Jesus was dying in Gethsemane. There were no Romans there. There were no temple police there. Jesus was dying in Gethsemane. And what was God's role? Sending an angel to sustain him.
But if I put my 6-year-old into quicksand and they were sinking, and I knew that quicksand would take their life, and I'd created that quicksand in the first place, aren't I still culpable for allowing that to happen?
That sounds like a good human perspective. On the other hand, I suspect there are much larger issues at work in this dynamic. And one of those is the fact, if you read Steps to Christ, that God is love, and love requires freedom. If you have no freedom, then your love is coerced. Your love is simply robotic. So it's not love. Genuine love is a genuine response of a human being to the love of another, and requires freedom. And if you are truly free, then you are free to reject as well.
But if I say to someone, you're free to be my friend, but if you're not, then you're going to be dead forever. There's an unwritten coercion there by implication and by inference, isn't there?
Well, then that is one of those qualifiers that makes the love of God null and void, isn't it? That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so how does one move past that? I find in Ellen White statement after statement where she says things like death and suffering and so on are the natural consequences of the choices we make.
But
if you see the judgment more in terms of natural consequences than in terms of God's active judgment, then I think it puts a different dynamic on it.
But she also refers to the devil after the fall occurring, going back to God and saying, forgive me. And he said it was too late. Wouldn't a God of love offer that forgiveness and not make it too late?
The God of the Bible certainly did offer that forgiveness at that point. But if God said it was too late, then there was something within Satan himself that would not have allowed him to truly embrace. In other words, Satan may have meant well in coming back and making that statement, but the one who knows him better than he knows himself knew that within himself he had made commitments that he could never follow through on at that point.
That's a whole other conversation, really. I'd love to.
I'd love very to well be. Probably a little over both of our heads, but you know, I think that, and again, I didn't say that about the cross and stuff to you know, make a final judgment. It's just I'm rethinking the whole thing of judgment.
Yeah.
Realizing that the way it's normally expressed actually undermines our perception of God's love and our desire to to be part of God's life. And so, you know, I just noticing on the cross, and I honestly, you know, and I did not know how you would respond to it, but honestly, you know, nowhere is God killing Jesus there. It's sin that kills him, and what God said in the beginning to Adam and Eve: if you sin, you will surely die. He's not saying, you know, if you sin, I will kill you.
Was there ever a time when sin wasn't around?
I would say so, yes. God is not the author of sin. So God is the author of freedom.
How did it come into being?
That's a wonderful question. And when you look at Ezekiel and Isaiah, you got some hints there, and I'm not prepared to go into detail on this. But basically, what happened is that Satan began thinking some other thoughts, and it says in Ezekiel that his thinking became distorted.
And who created Satan?
God did.
So he created those thoughts of sin, or knew they would eventually come about?
He did not create sin. He did not create the thoughts of sin, but he did allow freedom.
He knew Satan would have those thoughts.
That may be the case.
So why didn't he?
There's a debate on that too.
Why didn't he nullify his existence then?
Yeah, Rick Rice at Loma Linda, you know, has built up a biblical basis for arguing that God knows everything that there is to know, and one thing that if God experiences time the way that we do, then God would, sorry about that, God would be able to project the future and certainly what he will do. But God experiences time along with us. And biblically, you can make the case both ways. But the point is, if we operate with one assumption, we turn out to be wrong, then that's the only reason I brought that up. Yeah.
But if the devil is asking forgiveness and God knows that he's deep down going to continue sinning, so he won't be forgiven, if he also knows that he's going to sin one day, then I guess you're saying that he applies that same principle at that point too.
I don't think God's forgiveness is ever qualified. I don't think it's ever not available. But you know, just as an example, if you're an alcoholic, would you want to live forever in a place that has no bars and no alcohol? I wouldn't. And God respects that free decision.
And I would love to talk more about this because I'm fascinated by that, and I think you would teach me lots. So we'll have to get you back after the Glacier Review, and we'll talk about sin, because that does have big ramifications. What is sin? What's the definition? But I'll
yeah
I'll put that on the shelf a little bit for a moment.
I'm 2 hours past my supper here, so
we'll wrap it up.
Hold some things for another time.
Yeah. Did you ever just two quick things to wrap up?
I'm surprised. It's Peter from 2026 again, just dropping in to thank Moto Sapien again for sponsoring today's program. But I was surprised. I kept pushing back on him there, whether I was right or wrong. I think I asked, in my humble opinion, some valid questions there. And one thing I've noted when you interview progressive Adventists, whenever I've interviewed them and they start feeling uncomfortable with the questions, they always go, anyway, it's getting late, I'd better start going. I've put in a lot of extra time here. Anyway, it's just an observation. But yeah, look, I really am enjoying this conversation I'm having with Dr. John Paulien, and I'm certainly learning a lot. And, today's program has been made possible because of Moto Sapien. And as we work through season 2, the seminal series that looked at Desford and Glacier View and revealed the truth of what went on there, the kangaroo court that it was, and in many ways the weakness that followed from a lot of the progressive Adventists who perhaps put their love of culture, position, status, financial security ahead of defending Desford. Perhaps I might be wrong. Let me know in the chat. But either way, season 2 revealed so much about Glacier View, and that's why it's been languishing, deleted. Almost all of the episodes Facebook have deleted because they were live, and they delete live episodes every 30 days now. And so this incredible material is not available anywhere. That's why I'm putting it up onto YouTube, and have dedicated a YouTube channel called Season 2, SDAQ&A Season 2. Go and find it, subscribe, where these important interviews will hopefully continue to be a resource for future generations who are interested in this incredible era, the Glacier View 1980 kangaroo court of Desford. And look, the leaders may have done the right thing. Anyone that questions Ellen White's authority is really like a termite coming into the wooden structure of Adventism. And so they saw that. So, it's a fascinating topic. And for folk like Moto Sapien who are sponsoring today, I really appreciate it, because it's now finding a home. So, yeah, A, we're making it public, and B, I can only do so if people sponsor an episode. So please think about it. This is number 35. Think about sponsoring an episode, and get in touch with me about it if you'd like to. But Moto Sapien is giving people a chance to learn more about Graham Maxwell. And if you go to speakingwellofgod.org, there's so much material there. And he's encouraging you to go and look at conversations about God. Can God be trusted? But just have a good look around there for content on Graham Maxwell. And John Paulien spoke highly of Graham Maxwell and has mentioned him several times in this interview. Okay, back to 2020, and it's about to wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Only, I think, 10, 15 minutes left.
And one is just a question that I think Jill may have asked. With the knowledge you have on understanding Greek, Hebrew, the perspective, the context of Bible teaching and prophecy and all of that stuff, did you ever struggle with a pre-Advent judgment and a new phase occurring on October 22, 1844, being able to kind of prove it from the Bible?
Yeah, well, I remember one student in a doctoral seminar when I was talking about clear texts and unclear texts. One student piped up, and he's now a professor at one of our colleges, but he piped up and says, is Daniel 8:14 a clear text? And I thought that was a brilliant question. And I said, no, it's not.
What did he
Actually,
say to that?
Daniel 8 verses 9 to 12 is one of the numbingly most difficult texts I've ever seen. I remember in the Daniel and Revelation committee, we had some of the 1888 folk come, and they have a particular view of the daily in Daniel 8. And we were looking at the Hebrew, you had Bill Shea there, and you had Gerhard Hazel there, and you had, all these folk, Arthur Furch and so on, all these Hebrew experts. And we were sitting there looking at the Hebrew text, and I was kind of like, man, I had no idea. The English is easier than the Hebrew in Daniel 8, particularly verses 9 to 12. The English is clearer than the Hebrew is. And so the bottom line is, I think Daniel 8:14 is very, very central to our mission. Very, very, central to our history, the development of who we are as a people. I don't think we should ever give that up. I mean, that's historical. That's a reality. Will it mean the same today that it meant back then? No. Will today's generation get excited about 1844? No, because it doesn't matter today if it happened in 1842, 1844, or 1847. The specificity of that date was really important at that moment, but today it doesn't matter to today's generation. It doesn't make any difference. So it's important to tell that story. It's part of who we are. It's part of our story. It's important to tell that story and how the pioneers made those decisions. But today, Adventism may not get its motivating energy from Daniel 8:14 in the way that it did before. So I think.
Does it still point to a new phase in Christ's ministry, though?
I think the way it was read in that time and in that place, very much so. And I would make a distinction between exegetically defensible and exegetically compelling. And I think, and this is a conversation I had with Des by email at one point. There are things that Adventists teach that are exegetically defensible, but they're not exegetically compelling. When you read a text like Daniel 8 or like the Seven Trumpets, you're not going to end up with an exegetically compelling position.
I like that.
Because there's enough ambiguity in the original language, enough ambiguity in the context that you're going to have differences of opinion. I think the way that the Adventist pioneers read Daniel 8 is as good as any reading of Daniel 8. And therefore, I can say it's defensible exegetically. Does that mean it's compelling exegetically? No. Does that mean it's compelling theologically today? It may not be nearly as much. So
when you say it's defensible exegetically back then, but not necessarily compelling theologically, is that kind of saying that perhaps nothing happened supernaturally that in that time era, but that providentially we do have the Adventist Church today, and the mission of that is worthwhile?
Well, I remember Des saying that the essence of 1844 is God starting a movement here, and I think there's a lot to say about that. I think it is powerful. On the other hand, I don't see a problem with the idea of judgment playing a significant role in these events. And I don't see a more compelling interpretation of the 2300 days than what Adventists have given. I might differ with Des a little on this point. The Antiochus Epiphanes thing is full of problems too, It's not all that compelling unless you don't believe in predictive prophecy. If you don't believe in predictive prophecy, then everything was written after the fact. And since Daniel, and some of these other books were, written before the time of Jesus, then the fulfillment would have to be somewhere before then. So, but if you don't come at Daniel with the belief that there's no such thing as predictive prophecy, if you don't come at Daniel assuming it's in the 2nd century, the Antiochus Epiphanes interpretation, though it was an ancient one, 2nd century BC, is not any more compelling than the Adventist reading of Daniel 8. That would be my argument. And there's a fellow at the seminary, Oliver Glantz. I haven't actually even met him. He's a younger guy. And he wrote a paper, and maybe I shouldn't say anything about it because it's unpublished. But to me, it was just, lifting the lid off. He wrote a paper and saying, what is the purpose of the investigative judgment? And
Question.
he said, basically, well, there's two missions in heaven. One would be vindicating the character of God, and the other would be vindicating our character. And both of those would require that God provide a biography of each of us. The biography is the evidence base that would cause, God's character to be vindicated by unfallen worlds up there. And it also lets them know that the neighborhood isn't going to go when we move in. So those are two issues that are really significant up there that would be benefited by an investigative judgment before. Not investigating, whether God is not deciding who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost. Those biographies are already in place. But he is revealing those biographies, and they are full and complete biographies. Every motive, everything we don't even know we thought or did or why, it's all there, and it's all exposed, and it's all out there in the open, and God's decisions can be judged and vindicated by those who have the most at stake in how God handles us.
So who are those people?
Well, they would be beings on other planets and in heavenly places who have not sinned and not sided with Satan in the controversy. They're taking a big risk when we show up, So then Glantz goes on, and this is the best part, I think, is that what's the mission of the millennium? He says we each get our own biography, and we each get to process our whole life.
But why do we need another
and we're
vindication?
And we're going to read biographies of our parents and discover how we ended up the way we were and where we were. And then maybe their parents and so on. And we'll get into small groups and discuss each other's biographies. And every so often, maybe Jesus will come in and give us a little bit of extra advice. Because it does seem to me,
I'm horrified by that.
Most people, I'm not. Most people, when they die, are anything but fit for eternity, it seems. And yet they may die trusting children of Jesus with a lot of hang-ups and repressed memories and flashes of anger and whatnot. What's a Jew going to do when a concentration camp guard shows up? That person, etc.
Two things to that. Surely they've got these other beings in other planets. Surely they've got the idea now. Like, how much more do they need to see? They
don't. They won't at that point. We will.
Yeah, but why doesn't the end? Why doesn't the end come sooner? Surely, if the point is so that our biographies can be teaching these people how terrible sin is, it's kind of been, isn't it long enough now?
Well, the Bible has only one answer to that question,
and
that's 2 Peter, and that's that God is merciful and doesn't want anybody to be lost, but all come to repentance.
So he's holding off to give a few more sperms yet to be born and turn into babies into given a chance.
In a sense, the longer it lasts, the better God looks. In the end, not now, not to us right here, but in the end,
it wasn't.
God will,
yeah, I get that part. But wasn't, back to vindication, wasn't vindication at the cross? Wasn't that the whole point of Christ dying on the cross, this moment where sin killed him.
Yeah, and they were
wasn't that
settled about God. Yeah, they were settled about God, and now have to be settled with our role in the larger picture and how God handled that.
So
Yeah.
Christ
I don't
dying
think they have questions about God. No.
So Christ dying on the cross didn't reveal to them humanity's role in it.
Not our individual role, no. Humanity in the Christ sense, yeah.
Is it possible that nothing happened in 1844 at all, and that's possibly all wrong?
Well, we'll find out. I'm not troubled about that. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I think it's a pretty compelling vision when it's handled in a healthy biblical way. Some of the stuff we're talking about now is way over both of our heads. But
well, it's over mine anyway. Not yours.
It's fun to talk about anyway. So I like what Glantz did. Maybe I haven't represented it as well as I could, but
if you're going to consider it being a possibility of even happening, it's an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah,
and what
it shouldn't be over our heads though. Like the simple gospel, the understanding of the atonement at the cross. Yeah, there's lots of areas you can talk about, but the core basic teaching of this plan of salvation shouldn't be over our heads. Anyway.
Just to give you one little vignette, that last time I met Des, and this is, one time when I was a little disappointed in him, because I had just completed with a student a dissertation on the book of Hebrews. And this was a student from Mexico, a very conservative Adventist, who did a dissertation on Jesus' ascension to heaven and what happened at that point, according to Hebrews. And basically what he did is he marched through the book of Hebrews and made a compelling case for an Adventist view on every one of the controversial points in Hebrews. Mm. And I found it convincing. And the outside examiner was Harry Attridge, who was at the time was at Yale and was considered the world's leading authority on the book of Hebrews.
Wow.
And Harry Attridge passed the dissertation without a mark. In other words, he just thought this was an amazing theological summary of Hebrews. And I shared that with Des, and he says, that's impossible. You can't do it.
Can't do what?
Can't do it. Defend the Adventist view of Hebrews.
Oh, right.
And I was disappointed because, I wasn't saying that from any desire to counter him or anything. I just said we had a student who had this dissertation, and it got the approval of the world's leading expert on Hebrews as solid exegesis.
Again, sorry to drop in. I did say I wasn't going to be dropping in with with stuff. But anytime Des gets a bit of a pushback there, I do like to speak up for him, to say people are disappointed with that kind of comment when the scholars and academics know full well that earlier, that I forget what it's called now, but that conference was pulled together because oh man, I'm getting annoyed with my brain sometimes. Anyway, one of the theologians, Cottrell, I think it was, or Hassel, I can't remember the names, but anyway, they wrote to the president of the time and said, we can't seem to get this conclusion from the Bible alone. So they have their meeting. So the president said, okay, write to all the theologians and scholars and see what they think. And I think he sent out 27 letters and 26 came back or something, and no one could. No one said they could do it from the Bible alone, this particular topic there that John is talking about. And so the president said, well, why don't you get a conference together? And they did. And this is that famous conference where they met on and off for 5 years, came to the conclusion that it couldn't be done, and disbanded and did not keep the minutes. So when the Progressive Adventist, wheels out these little nuanced attacks on Des, my radar pings, and I feel like I want to defend Des for that moment and that claim that, oh, I'm disappointed in Des for that. Des would have just done a throwaway comment based on knowing that this topic cannot, no matter how young or impressive and intelligent a young person is that's bringing this to the table saying they can do it from the Bible alone, it can't be done. And all the scholars got together and they knew it couldn't be done. So when scholars put Des down for saying that kind of thing, that it can't be done, they're inferring that he was just being arrogant and not willing to compromise, which is not true. Okay, back to the program. And look, did I get it wrong? Have I misunderstood what he was saying? I've really learned something. I've really learned that it's totally fine for me to like people and get on really well with them, but to disagree with them. That's how I feel about John and a lot of the scholars and a lot of people in general, because I'm human. We'd all have no friends if we agreed with each other. So yeah, with that in light, back to the program.
And it kind of puts a different perspective on some of these Hebrews issues. And Des simply said, nah, he says, you can't do it. I'm not interested. So I would have appreciated this.
To say I can't do it, I'm not interested, is such an inaccurate assessment. I'm pretty sure Des was on that committee that was disbanded, that spent hours over 5 years. He was interested and he put a lot of time into trying to make it provable that from the Bible alone, all of this stuff can be proven. So yeah, I'm annoyed when they don't cut him the slack that I think they should.
No,
you said, I'd like to read that and give you some feedback.
Knowing a little bit about Aussie kind of vernacular, Aussies kind of do that a bit as well. He would definitely have been interested in that kind of thing, but sometimes I've heard myself saying it. Sometimes even in these interviews, where you go, oh yeah, you could never prove that anyway. And you suddenly later you'll think, oh, I think I may have offended that person because they may not totally get how we kind of phrase things. I think with Des, some of these things were closed issues. He'd fought them long and hard enough, and he wasn't really interested in reopening them. That's how I took it.
Yeah, and fair enough. It doesn't worth it. You don't use words like I was disappointed in him. You don't have to say that. You could say off the bat, this young bloke put this stuff together, and one Hebrew scholar said it was very accurate, and Des had been through so much with this stuff. When I spoke to him, he was like, nah, couldn't be bothered. So what? But by using words like I was disappointed in Des. Okay, back to 2020.
And if you're at that place, it might not even have been healthy for him to do that at that point, to open up old wounds and try to rethink something that in his mind had been significantly settled.
And you weren't even saying what your opinion was. You were just saying, here's a student, here's a very well-respected theologian. He's taking some of his source material from that. It's quite interesting. You weren't saying yourself, you can prove it.
Well, I was saying I found this work very persuasive,
right?
And so did Attridge. So I would have hoped Des would say, "Wow, that's not what I would expect. I'll have to look into it. But he said, no, impossible, can't do it.
And yeah, and again, not to defend Des, but just possibly you're right that at the time of his life, he's gone. You know what?
Yeah. By the way, we did have a very close friend in common the last years of his life, and that's Graham Bradford.
Oh yes.
He and I worked closely together. So he was kind of a conduit. Graham was a
Yeah.
conduit between Des and me of stuff through those years. And I'm sorry that we don't have either one of those today.
Yeah. Graham, lovely man, and I'm good friends with his kids actually. Yeah. Just, one last quick thing, because I want to wrap it up in 2 minutes, because I think you've given us so much time. You're starving, no doubt, and I want to finish on a really positive note.
So just before we finish on that positive note that I speak of, thank you everyone for supporting the show. If you'd like to send me a couple of dollars, it really helps. And the details are just there, paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. And I wanted just one last time to thank today's sponsor, Moto Sapien, for, I think, doing such a good thing in bringing to light someone that I had not heard of until I met Moto Sapien here on the channel, Graham Maxwell. And so Moto Sapien has sponsored today's program in the hope that you guys will go and check out speakingwellofgod.org. And if you go there and check it out, you can actually listen and watch videos of Graham Maxwell at his prime, speaking his message, his version of Adventism. And it's, I think Moto Sapien has said he'd love you to check out Conversations About God and Can God Be Trusted? And as I said, it's available free from Speaking Well of God. So thank you so much, Moto Sapien. And I can verify, even though I'm, the great slow, the long goodbye show. I apologize. Too bad. It's who I am. I'll try and improve, but I can confirm that
Just one quick challenge.
That there is only 10 minutes left. So probably a bit under that. So thanks for sticking with me today. I hope you've enjoyed the program. Back to 2020.
Are you saying that God was on trial at the cross? I just wanted to clarify that in my head.
That would be a metaphorical language, depending on what you mean by that, yes.
And then if you somehow work out the 1844 general time frame, new phase, you're saying that now that God is no longer on trial, that was vindicated at the cross, and now it is humanity that is on trial.
Again, when you put it that way, I could say yes to that, yeah.
Right.
But again, sometimes one thing that's very important to keep in mind is that since none of us have seen, heard, or touched God, everything we say about God is ultimately analogical or metaphorical. Righteousness by faith is a law court metaphor. The sanctuary, is a temple metaphor that deals with cleanliness and things like that. These are all metaphors. And I think the problem is we tend to take our favorite metaphor and make it the only one and try to interpret everything through that lens. For the Standish brothers and others, the lens that they viewed everything with is a couple of isolated statements in Ellen White that says the day is going to come when we'll stand without a mediator. And
how do you feel about that?
Explaining that concept was somehow the central theme that and the whole structure that they put together. But clearly that would have to be metaphorical as well. I mean, the whole idea of mediation is metaphorical. And it's interesting that at one point, at least in John 16, Jesus says, you don't need a mediator. The Father himself loves you. So a mediator perhaps is a metaphor that helps us get comfortable with the idea of God
Mm.
through the lens of somebody we can know and see, like Jesus.
Mm.
And even the idea of intercession is a metaphorical idea that in some contexts isn't necessary.
Yeah. Now I
And,
think I
and that
get
would be also true of righteousness by faith. It's a
yeah.
law court metaphor. And when you play that metaphor, for me, it was very, very powerful
Mm.
to take a legalist and say, God is not committing some crime in saving you. That's
Mm.
how it felt to me.
Mm.
If I don't do better, it's be a crime for God to save me. And to realize that it's not was something that righteousness by faith, as Des and Bob put it out, helped me to get past that point. Today, it's not a metaphor that's nearly as critical anymore, but I needed it at that point, and there's a lot of people that need it today, I'm sure.
I think I'm grasping where you're coming from, and I'm glad I just dug a little bit deeper there, and I really appreciate your answer. And I agree. A lot of this is metaphor. Maybe God is a metaphor. A lot of people claim faith in God, but I'll sometimes ponder, but can't faith be used to justify any belief?
Depends on what you mean by faith. That's also a metaphor. Yeah. Faith can mean an intellectual idea. I believe this. Faith can mean that you somehow have talked yourself into putting God at the center of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think most biblically, faith is trust in a person that you have evidence for trusting. Trust happens slowly over a long period of time in a variety of circumstances. And to me, that's what the Bible is all about. You've got a zillion stories in there that make no sense at all unless you see them through the lens of God saying, here's how I handle all kinds of difficult situations. They may be ugly situations. You may not like this story, but I can handle it. I can take this and I can bring something good out of it. And little by little, as you read through those stories, you begin to trust that the God portrayed there is someone that you can stake your life on. And that to me is the better definition of faith. And it's not just a leap in the dark or
It does require compelling evidence, though, and there's those who would say
Right.
that the evidence that you've accrued in your lifetime that has compelled you to have faith of that within that definition is not compelling for them.
And if you're willing to stake your life on that, some people will make that decision. Yeah.
Because that leads a lot of Christians to then claim that their way, the Bible way, is the only way, when perhaps it's not.
Was that a question? I don't think so.
It was rhetorical with a possible opening for you to say something if you wanted.
Yeah. Certainly, nature gives us a mixture of evidence. For many people reading the Bible, it's a mixture of evidence. I do think when you read it in light of a cosmic conflict, the Bible makes more sense. And some of those stories that are extremely difficult start making more sense. And over time, I think if a person comes to the Bible with an open and positive heart, they will see more and more evidence that God is truly gracious and so on. And we can close with this, but there's a text that until last year I never thought was very important, and that's Nehemiah chapter 9. And I just read it with new eyes about a year ago and just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because Nehemiah 9 is a summary of the whole Old Testament. It starts with my computer is about to die, because where I am, it's not plugged in. Anyway, so that'll end this very precipitously shortly.
Can't cut off just now, though.
Yeah, well, it's in battery saver mode. That means we probably have a half hour or so, but let's not twist it.
We'll wrap it up.
but basically, I just lost my train of thought.
The profundity of this new perspective as you read Nehemiah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Nehemiah 9. It's a summary of the whole Old Testament, and it tells two tales. Number one, God is always faithful, always merciful, always forgiving, and that Israel was always unfaithful, always ungracious, always rebellious, etc. So it starts, right in the beginning with Abraham and stuff, and God was gracious and faithful, but Israel was such and such and such. Nevertheless, God remained faithful, and Israel was such and such. In other words, the Old Testament, according to Nehemiah, is basically giving two messages. One of the character of God and one of the character of human beings. And that in spite of human character, God remains faithful, remains relentless in his love and his pursuit of human beings. And only a settled determination not to allow God in your life can counter the relentless hesed love of God. That's a wonderful Hebrew word that means relentless love. And it's used of God probably more than any other word. So Nehemiah kind of summarizes the whole Old Testament with all those ugly stories and says the point of this story is that God is faithful no matter how many terrible things go on. And I think the purpose of those stories is there to little by little build in us a trust in that God when we face similar circumstances ourselves.
And how exciting that, this is only in the last year you've stumbled across a new perspective. And I think that's wonderful. And in this conversation, I've noticed that with you, that you're open, you're gracious, you're articulate. You've really shared some of yourself with us, what you do, and I really value that and appreciate you going above and beyond today for us. And I just wanted to finish by really making a statement, and you're welcome to comment on it, but of gratitude to what you're doing there at Loma Linda, and what a marvelous place it is. And you've kind of helped spotlight and given us an insight into some of the incredible things that are happening there that are quite unique, and I appreciate that you've done that today.
Well, thank you. It was good to be with you, and this discussion has gone all kinds of places I wasn't expecting, and so I hope it is beneficial in the long run. And
all discussion.
If not, we'll find out soon enough.
Thank you so much, John. I've really appreciated it, and I know our viewers have too. Thank you very much.
So that's the interview there with Dr. John Paulien. I loved how he said at the end, it went different places he wasn't expecting. That's the joy of SDAQ&A conversations. I don't even know where they're going most of the time. But I did appreciate those last few minutes there when he was talking about metaphors. I do look at life a lot from, metaphorically, I guess. And yeah, it's it kind of really, I was able to then go, okay, I can now look back on everything he said and understand it a bit more, where he was coming from, whether you agree or not, or I agree or not. When you understand a person's kind of anchor point, you can understand then all the spill off, and why when he defined faith, it for me is more confidence, not faith. Yeah, well, if everything is metaphorical, well, you can see why someone would say that. And I am genuinely impressed with his kind of leadership, and no judgment to these guys. I've said lately that I think they should have spoken up more back then, but really I don't think that. I'm really meaning that now they know this stuff, and they've seen the last 6 years where change hasn't happened. They've seen the last 90 years where change hasn't happened. They've noted that the foothold they've talked about would eventually start gaining traction and influence hasn't happened. I just feel like now they could re-speak up, particularly post reclaiming the prophet that got banned when they did speak up. I'd love them to just to speak up now, not necessarily with all their words and their word salad, but more in action. I'm not judging the past. I'm not judging 6 years ago. I am suggesting that these guys have an opportunity, a window that is closing, and I'm just cajoling. My job is, guys, if you truly, just as an observer from the outside, if you truly see value in this kind of Adventism that puts Ellen White in a different perspective, if you truly see value in that, you have to get organized, networked, coordinated, start your own regional conferences. Something has to, don't. But I'm not attacking. I'm challenging you with an observation that I don't think people on the inside can see. I'm on the outside looking in, and don't take my advice. I might be wrong, but at least ponder that window is closing. And just bring up a comment from Moto Sapien, who is today's sponsor, and I think agreed there with John, something that he said in the last minute there. Yes, God is the faithful and trustworthy one. In spite of us, God keeps his promises. That's the point, that we can trust God. And so one last time, I just want to really thank you, Moto Sapien, for being today's sponsor. And Moto Sapien is encouraging people to go to this website, speakingwellofgod.org, to go to it and check out the work of Graham Maxwell. And viewers may decide they don't want to, they don't have to, they can, whatever. Moto Sapien is sponsoring today to give you the opportunity and information on a whole lot of material that is available there if you'd like to check it out. So I'm just encouraging you to thank Moto Sapien for sponsoring today's program and for steering people in the direction of speakingwellofgod.org. Tomorrow we have Ryan Day is going to be our guest speaker. So those watching this in the future, I'm talking about Friday the 13th Australia time and Thursday 5:30 p.m. California time on the 12th. So thanks for watching. I've loved the comments as always, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Good News Fellowship, Gospel Good News Fellowship is the name of our channel. It's not here on this channel. It's on its own channel, Gospel Good News Fellowship. Ryan Day, formerly of 3ABN, known right around the world for his massive decision to leave the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And every interview I've done with him, 2 or 3 on SDAQ&A, has gone ballistic. We did one a couple of weeks ago. It's well over 4,000 views and hundreds of comments. He's going to simply tomorrow share the good news of the gospel, unfiltered, from his heart. Join us on YouTube at Gospel Good News Fellowship. And thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you then. See ya.